Welcome to episode 5 of Spinning Wheels, the motorsport podcast, which my co-host Guy Smith and I promised would bring you fascinating stories from behind the scenes of four-wheeled motorsport. A promise which we hope you'll agree we've well and truly delivered on. Guy, I could hardly have imagined the stories that we would have unearthed from my little office here in my garage. You've lived the other side of the cockpit and the visor, and your eyebrows have been turned and raised up just as much as mine at times.
Yeah, it's been really good, actually. I mean, a few of the guests that we've already spoken to, I knew already, so I kind of knew a little bit about them. But even for me, I've been learning some new, facts about them, and about it's been interesting to hear about their stories of how they, got into racing or rallying in Elfin's case. So it's been really fascinating. So I'm really interested to the next guest we're going to speak to shortly. I know pretty well, but there's a lot of gaps in his story, which I'm interested to hear about. So I'm really looking forward to this one, Paul.
And I'm finally getting the chance to wear my bit of merchandise, which I bought many moons ago, which I'm sure our guests will appreciate. Now, last time on Spinning Wheels, we brought you a candid, very human account from WRC driver Elfyn Evans on the, at times, rocky road that he's been on in order to get to the World Rally Championship. But there are two people in a rally car, so we can't forget the co-driver. And today's guest is arguably the world's most famous co-driver of them all, having called the pace notes for some legendary names from the world of rallying, as well as calling the pace notes for you and I in our bedrooms on an equally legendary computer game. I am, of course, talking about Nicky Grist, if you hadn't guessed it from a jacket. Welcome to Spinning Wheels, Nicky.
Yeah, nice to see that outfit of yours, and looking at all that memorabilia in the background there. I think it's fair to say you're a complete and utter boblatter, as well as
I am, yeah.
Well as a
motor already.
These guys got some credibility behind the wheel behind him, Paul. But
I've got my Stilo. I made sure I got my Stilo helmets on display as well. So we'll come back to that one in a little while.
I didn't win Le Mans. That's the difference, Nicky. So I find it a bit more difficult.
No, listen. Total respect for what you do as well, though, Paul. Fair play.
So Nicky, actually, I was just reading a little bit on you and Wikipedia. I didn't realise that you were a golf pro originally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I had no interest in motorsport as a kid, nothing at all. My first ever contact with motorsport was when one morning I hopped over the back wall of home, going up to the bus stop to catch the bus to go to school. And I'm walking up the road, and there was this sign on this lamppost, Lombard RAC Rally, quiet. And the RAC Rally had actually passed the back of my house. I had no idea. And, I came home that night and it was still there. So I thought, right, we'll have that. Get that. But still no real interest in motorsport. And my grandfather introduced me to golf. And I joined my local golf club, which is 5 minutes from where I live now. And that was it. I was hooked on golf. And after a number of years, I gave up school as soon as I could and went straight into the pro shop and was basically an assistant pro for a few years until motorsport kicked in.
So what handicap do you play off now then, Nicky? Because I know you still play quite a bit, don't you? You still pretty
Well, I haven't played for 6 months. So... it's going to be a bit ropey when I go out next time, but my handicap's 6. But I'd like to play a lot more, but with the business and one thing and another, I'd love to be playing at least 2-3 times a week to get down a bit lower again. But until you can commit yourself, you'll never get down to very low figures.
If you're listening to this in the middle of next year, in the middle of 2021, we're actually in the middle of coronavirus lockdown, and so Nicky has an excuse for at least 3 months of those 6 that he hasn't played golf.
Well, the thing is, they just open up golf courses, fortunately. In England, you can play with one other person. Spatial awareness is not an issue. But in Wales, you can play by yourself or with one of your living family members. Well, there's not many people on a golf course that has living family members that play golf. So there'll be a lot of single golfers just walking around by themselves. But anyway, it's a chance to swing a golf club and keep myself a little bit occupied, other than golf and everything else.
And you're guaranteed to win, of course. So Nicky, we've heard obviously from the race drivers and rally drivers, and it's interesting to find out how they got into motorsport. So how does a kid from Wales who's a sort of professional golfer get into motorsport then? How did that come about?
Well, it was all through road rallying, which for a navigator co-driver was the superb way to start. And I went to a local friend's engagement party, and this was in my home village. And there was a few people there who said, "Oh, there's a road rally passing over the top of the Blorenge Mountain quite close to me." And I thought, "Oh, I'll maybe go and have a look at that later." And they said, "Yeah, there's a few of us going up." So off we went. We knew exactly where to go, and we watched it there. And then we met somebody else at that spot that we knew. And they said, "Oh, we're going to another place." So then we went to another place and another place. And then before I knew it, it was like 5:30 in the morning in Hay-on-Wye, having a breakfast, having watched the whole proceedings. And from that moment on, I was kind of hooked. So I started spectating at the start, following these road rallies, until I started dabbling in, joined a local motor club, Abergavenny Auto Club, and then I started doing a little bit of navigating, co-driving, because as a young golf pro, I think I was earning 15 quid a week. I couldn't afford a car. So I just started in the passenger seat, and that's where it all started, really, Guy.
Yeah. Did you ever fancy? Did you ever sort of have any ambitions to drive? Was that ever a sort of something you thought, well, I'd really like to drive, but I don't have the opportunity, so I'll navigate? Or as you've gone through your career, have you ever thought, oh, I quite fancy having to go driving now, see what it's like on the other side of the seat?
Well, not really. I think mainly because when I was competing as a navigator or co-driver, it was a money issue. I just didn't have it didn't have a car, didn't have the resources to sustain it. So I was happy to go along with the way I did, and I committed myself quite heavily to it. And I think anybody that wants to get on has to commit to it and do it properly. And every step I took was a bigger and better step. And, over the years, I ended up being at the pinnacle of the sport, and I was competing at the top level, which was a far greater level than I ever would have made it as a driver anyway. So, I was happy with my lot, although I have started driving a little bit more recently.
Fair to say your first rally car was an ex-Wirt Celica, and your first co-driver was a reigning British rally champion. It's not bad, Nicky, is it, as a start?
No, it's not. I had my own passenger coach, but yeah, fair play. We had a bit of fun. I mean, I did go and do Eiffel Rally in Germany last year, which was good fun, and I took a young lad off the Motorsport UK Academy with me. So, but I think it's funny. I'm out of my comfort zone. When I'm in the driver's seat, in the co-driver seat, never had to think about anything. It just was normal. It was natural. But, not being a professional driver, you have to think about everything. And I don't do that much of it. Again, practice makes perfect. But it was just a case of, just carry on and just do a bit of fun. And, the car's got a bit of value about it, and I don't want to crash it. So, but I really enjoy driving it, and it was my favorite car. But I guess we'll come back to that later, I suppose.
Yeah, I just find it amazing. When you listen to you talk there about, you sit in the passenger seat and you're never scared. I mean, maybe as a driver, you feel more of a control freak, because I think whenever I'm driving, I feel like I'm in control. Whenever I'm in a passenger seat, there's that element of I'm not in control. And that frightens me. I don't know whether it's just me personally, or I think a lot of drivers that I've spoken to feel that the same way. And I think, I've got full of admiration for you co-drivers, because to sit there and put the trust in the driver that you sat with, and really believe in them. I mean, obviously, as a co-driver, you've got a massive amount of control as well, because you're kind of their eyes in a lot of ways. I just think it's amazing. And of course, you're sitting with different drivers, so I guess every driver, you have to really feel the car and what's going on in the car, and being able to understand the driver that you're with, and being able to either hold them back or push them on. Or I know with my own rally, and I have Patrick Walsh sits with me, and he's very, very, very good at knowing my limit, to whether I'm performing at my limit and he can push me, or whether he needs to pull me back because I'm getting a bit carried away. And I guess that's what a good co-driver can do. It's been able to balance. If you're like with somebody like Colin, for example, I imagine that there's times where he would need reining in. I can't imagine there's many times, you need to tell him to push on. But that I mean, have you ever felt sort of scared in the car? I mean, obviously you've been with a lot of different drivers.
Not at a professional level. I was always quite comfortable in the car. I mean, of course, when you sat with a professional, they know what they're doing.
Yeah.
When I was going up through my career, there were some guys that weren't necessarily, totally in control. And as you say, as a good co-driver, that this is getting a bit ragged. You can see that somebody's getting off the line and, whoa, steady, calm it down a bit, brake a bit earlier, going in too hot. All of this just becomes natural as a co-driver. But it's surprising now when I put the shoe on the other foot is seeing it from the driver's seat as a co-driver driving. It's a difficult thing because you're so engrossed, rev counter, revs, gear change, brake, braking point, pace notes, and it's all coming through while it's still, I'm a little out of my comfort zone, but I'm enjoying it, but I would never push it to the limit and start crashing. That's not why I'm there, really. It's just a bit of fun.
We've got a good question, actually, from Thomas Harrison Lord. I think this was on Twitter, or was it Twitter? I think it was Twitter, guy. He says, in around 1999 in the Ford with Colin, you're reading a note and you put your index finger up as if to show some caution to Colin. And I said, I bet Nicky will remember this. And in a bit of a Stefan Prevost style, Duval's co-driver, at the end of the stage, Colin questioned why, and you didn't seem like you wanted to answer him. You seemed a bit perplexed. So Thomas wanted to know if you could remember what happened there, because not often would you have to have put your finger up to him, surely.
Colin was quite sensitive to the co-driver, what they were doing. He can, and I think professional drivers generally are quite sensitive to what the co-driver does. Colin used to get upset with me because I used to wave at people I recognize on the stage. What are you doing that for? I just say, oh, it's my mate. I saw him there, and I just give him a wave. Stop doing that. But I used to use that call. It was just a call. It was maybe a care or a caution, 3 left minus tightens over a narrow bridge. And the finger was just a point of, okay, this is important.
Right.
And maybe perhaps from whatever the situation, and I can't remember this one particularly, probably Colin felt it wasn't that kind of a serious enough situation for me to go careful.
You must be quite in tune for that to have picked up as something that wasn't quite in sync. That's quite incredible. For anyone who doesn't understand, that must be quite hard to get your head around. If you're listening to this at home, how in tune you have to be that finger was just slightly out of place and didn't seem right to Colin. That's brilliant.
Well, he was, naturally talented guy, but, at the end of the day, he was processing so much information. And it's not what I'm saying for the next corner. He's already looking at the corner ahead, looking at the lie of the land and seeing what's around that corner and seeing what potentially is coming up ahead. So, he was very much in tune of what you're doing. But you would expect it at that level, though, Paul, as well, really.
Yeah.
But, coming from my road rally background to co-driving in stage rallies, was very much an important part of my career. And I tell you why, and probably a lot of people are unaware of road rallies. They've changed such a lot now, but they're still very much an important part of the start of rallying in Wales, where you gather Saturday evening in a local car park or whatever, and you sign on, you get your route, which is all on map references, and you're plotting your route. And it's all at a 30-mile-an-hour average. But in a road rally, I would say the co-driver is most definitely 70% of the performance of that car, because everything has to be right. You need to get the slots. You can't overshoot. And it's on open public roads, but nowadays it's all at a 30 average. But sometimes the 30 average is quite difficult to achieve because of the narrow, twisty nature of Welsh lanes. But that was a lot of pressure on the co-driver in navigating on road events. And when you went up through to the higher echelons of the Motoring News Road Rally Championship, which a lot of old drivers from the past, Russell Brooks, Tony Pond, to name a few, and there's quite a few others have come up through the fray. It was intense, and then once you went into stage rallies, it became so much easier, because when you're looking at a map and you're reading the corners, each corner off a map through your body light, you have to look at it, you have to decide what it is, you then have to read it at the correct time to the driver. But in co-driving in stage events, you've got all the information written down on the book in front of you. So you don't have to think, process, decide on the call and read it in time. All you've got to do is look at it and read it on time. So stage rallying actually became quite easy.
Do you think it made you a better co-driver then, with that kind of training and that kind of processing, and I guess you had to have a feel for the notes that you were calling, whereas maybe today it's slightly different. But do you think that made you a better co-driver because you were looked a bit more in depth into the notes?
Most definitely. No, most definitely, Guy. And through the Motorsport Academy, which was the MSA Academy, when we asked people to apply, we always look quite seriously at road rally guys, because especially nowadays where there's so much happening all the time in today's road events, that they can process so much more information much better than somebody who just sits in there and is trying to learn his way by reading pace notes, be it organizer's notes or written by a driver. So a road rally navigator could actually make a much better co-driver. And when you go back over all the years, so many British co-drivers, made it to the top of the sport and came from road rallying. Would you like me to name a few?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, it'll be, myself, there'll be Phil Mills, there'll be Michael Park, Beef, God rest his soul. Going back even earlier, the likes of Dave Whittock, Fred Gallagher, who used to do road rallies as well over in Ireland. So there were, and there's probably somebody I've forgotten who I'm going to get seriously criticised for, but, Howard Davis with Gwyndaf, for instance, he came through road rallying. So many good British co-drivers came from road rallying.
For anyone listening at home as well, if you can't quite compute at the minute the difference between the two, I've been looking to have a bit of a go at both navigating and driving on a road rally, and then doing the same on both seats in a club stage rally. And the difference is just incredible. The pressure that Nicky talked about and that ability to process information, it makes you question your own brain power. It's like the only way I can describe it is a Mensa puzzle on the move, in the dark, in a car which, like mine, the map light was dying slowly through the night, so your eyes are going just so much, and it just doesn't stop, does it, Nicky? Your mind has to be completely focused 100% of the time.
Yeah, and there's a lot of pressure as well, because you've got a lot of information to plot onto a map, and half the time you've got maybe 4 or 5 individual instructions that you have to plot in 1 kilometer square, which is probably smaller than, say 20 millimeters square, and you've got 4 plots in there, and you've got to get the approach and the departure correct, and and then you haven't plotted it all, and then you get to petrol, and then the driver's gone off to have a beef burger and a chat with his mates, and the poor navigator then is trying to get the last part of the route down on the map. It's a brilliant sport, and as I said, it's been very much an important part of my career and getting me to where I am. So, I think it's there for everybody to go out and try. And, it'd be good for people to go out and try a bit of road rally.
It is accessible, isn't it? It is accessible. And people will talk you through it. At the motor club that I went to get into it, people would sit there and they'd sit and do a tabletop with you while they're chatting to the other blokes on the next table. And they wanted to give you their knowledge and impart that on you. And then you find that those same people are then making it as tricky as they can in the next 12 car, kind of a practice for the road rallies. And it's kind of camaraderie as well.
Well, a lot of people, if you went to a road rally, you think, my God, look how many people are here. This is like Kilwendig is a classic. I mean, I love Kilwendig rally, because there's so much happening, ducking and diving, going back on yourself, back almost to the same junction and then slotting right. There was these continuous loops back and forth. And, you know, you just think, Christ, I didn't realise all this went on in a small little provincial West Wales town. But the place is rammed with people because it's so popular. And yeah, it's been good. And that's just a small but important part of my career.
Going back to some of those names that you sat with once you started to go to the stage rallying side of things, Nicky, some of them are more obvious and people will have heard of more than others. But one name that stands out a little bit for me is someone who, a bit of a hero of mine, a bit like Tony Pond, never really saw him rally. I never saw him rallying that I can remember, but a bit of a hero all the same. Dave Metcalf, man who's famous for backing Novas into hairpins. And you were alongside him for some of his career, as short-lived as it was, unfortunately. What was he as extravagant inside the car as he looked on the outside? Because watching old rally videos as I do, it's all over the place. It's frantic.
It is. Well, I sat with him with General Motors or GM Dealer Sport, and we rallied their 1600 Nova. But Dave also had his own Group A 2-litre Astra, which we used on the National Championship. So, you know, being a front-wheel drive car, they tend to be a bit frantic anyway. But when you're trying to drive them really quickly, it tends to get a little bit more exciting. But Dave just seemed totally in tune with the car. And funny enough, I've been going through so much stuff, sorting out my storage space. So there's so much stuff up there, it's unbelievable. But I found a VHS cassette of masses of onboards from Dave and I in 1989. Wow. So I just sent it away to get it all put into some level of order and get them sort of put onto proper electronic format. So maybe I'll start sharing some of this footage.
Oh, that'd be fantastic.
But the angles he could get a little front-wheel drive car, and just the calmness and the ability to be able to do that, you know, going, as you say, going into hairpins backwards because he's coming so quick. You know, and the one result above all else that stands out for me was when we did the Manx International, when it was a 3-day tarmac event, full pace noted. We were up against all the factory Fords, so it would have been the likes of Jimmy, Russell Brooks, Mark Lovell, and then there was Phil Collins at the time, who was a big national champion, Austin McHale, lots of other very quick guys from Ireland. You know, and then there was Dave Metcalf in a Nova. You know, the Astras and everything else, who were our teammates, for some reason or another, were behind us. But we ended up finishing 4th overall on this event. And that was just absolutely astounding because it's a little Nova. It hasn't got 330 horsepower and big wide track and masses of grip. This thing was just unbelievable. And it was an awesome result. Absolutely stupendous. And that was literally the first time we won, as well as picking up our class awards and everything else. When we went to the finish and the prize giving in Summerlands in Douglas, we won the Star of the Rally Award. And literally the team picked us up and carried us through these thousands of people onto the stage. And, you know, it was just like, wow, flipping, this is brilliant. I'd never experienced such a thing. And it left quite a mark on me, I have to say. It did leave quite a mark on myself.
Because it was at that point you kind of made the sort of transition then from sort of, you know, more to be a professional co-driver at that point. I mean, were you still working as well, or are you fully committed to, made the sort of commitment, I'm going to be a full-time co-driver?
Well, to give you, I'll give you a little bit of from the start. I probably started my first road rally in the end of 1981. So I played around a little bit on a few events. Then I joined a local friend of mine here, Steve Davis, and we did the Welsh 1300 Championship in an Escort, road rallying. And then the following year, we went into a 2-litre Escort. And then I started to dabble with a few guys in stage rallying, but stuck with road events into Motoring News Championship in 1984, 85, 86, again playing around with different drivers on stage events. In 86, I did some rallies with a guy called Graham Middleton, and we then ended up doing British Championship in a Toyota Corolla for a couple of years. And that was 87, 88. I also co-drove for Harry Hockley who was a GM dealer sport driver in a 1300 Nova. So played around with some stuff with him in stage events. And then really, come 88, the road rallying for me was coming to an end. And I then had the opportunity to join Dave Metcalf in 89. So that was pretty action-packed that year. But Dave was really the springboard to bigger and better things, because in 89, our teammate, who was the team leader at that point, was Malcolm Wilson,
right,
driving the Astra for GM Dealer Sport. And, you know, he obviously saw how I operated, and you know, off we went, and he asked me to join with him in Ford. He had a 2-year contract with Ford Motor Company at Boreham, which was the original Ford base. And off we went into bits and pieces in the British Championship, developing a 4-wheel drive Sapphire Sierra Cosworth for the World Championship. And that was it. Then completely gave up my job full-time. And that's when I turned professional in 1990.
Can we just hold you there before we go off road rallying completely? I'm going to try and get these questions in as we go along so that they sort of fit with the story a bit. Steve Waggett on Twitter wanted to know, way back when you were doing road rallies, I know you said the Kilwendig is your favourite rally now, but what was your favourite event to compete on when you were road rallying?
I did enjoy Kilwendig. I loved West Wales. And I always loved Map 146, which was Lampeter, Llandovery area, and Llandyssil. And that area for me was brilliant. So it was Welsh Championship, wasn't necessarily Motor News Championship, but we used to do the San Helen Rally. We had a lot of success on San Helen Rally. So that was quite good for me. I also enjoyed the Eagle Rally, Map 136. Because there was a lovely class of roads up there, mixture of everything, and that was quite good as well. So Kilwendig, San Helen, and Eagle Rally.
I love that you still know the map numbers. I've got my best friend Tom Hutchins, who was my navigator and co-driver. He talks in map references and map numbers, and he knows, you know, we're going somewhere, he knows exactly what map number it's on and when to switch to the next map. It's got them all lined up in the door. That's just when you drive into the supermarket.
Mind you, I've been doing a number of quizzes since, you know, we've been in lockdown with friends and stuff. And of course, they keep dropping in the odd motorsport one to try and catch me out. And they did catch me out with a map number for Anglesey. Okay. I was trying to work it out. Now, the Llŷn Peninsula is this, and then you go across to Conwy, and then that goes to that map. And I got it wrong. So there you go.
At least you were able to start working it out. I wouldn't have been able to start working it out. So you've got the edge on the rest of us there. Okay, so we've got to the point where you're with Dave and the stage rallying things kicked off. You've gone to Malcolm. You're at Boreham, which Boreham's a legendary, mythical place for someone that wears things like this in their spare time.
Boreham, I mean, obviously at that time, you know, I was only a young lad then. I mean, probably, how old would I have been? 1990, let me quickly work it out. 29, would have been 29. So to go and visit Boreham, to go in through the front gate and, you know, then drive up and you could see this place that's all painted out in the Ford colours and, you know, and then you go inside and actually it was it's an old World War II sort of airfield. So they had their own test track there around Boreham. But there was masses of stuff there. There was bits of junk over in the back. Now, junk that today would be worth a bloody fortune, you know. And there was 2-wheel drive Sierra Cosworths in there. And then, of course, there was body shells and bits and pieces of Sapphire stuff, which is starting to come through as well. So, you know, and then to go up to meet Peter Ashcroft up in his office and all of this. And, you know, and we worked with Jim Porter, who at the time was the coordinator. Now he's synonymous British co-driver as well, you know, and I worked alongside him for a couple of years. So the whole thing was a bit surreal for me. And I mean, I was just a young kid, you know, had come up from the sport and, you know, started road rallying at the end of 1981. And then 9 years later, here I am in a factory team. It was just like, wow, it was brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
And did that come with the lifestyle at that point, or was that very much still building?
Yeah, I wouldn't say I was necessarily at the pinnacle of the sport then. I mean, I got a wage, which was a lot more than I was earning, but still wasn't big money as you'd expect in the top end of the sport. But it didn't matter. The money was secondary. It was having the opportunity. That was the key point. And, we were signed up for a 2-year contract, and we had British Championship in 1990 in a 2-wheel drive Sapphire, which was built and run by Mike Little, Operation Carlisle. And then we were doing test and development of the 4-wheel drive car on some World Championship events, because we went Monte Carlo Rally to do some timing on stages. And then these particular stages, we actually locked down, and then we used our timing to see where we were in relation to the leading competitors of the championship. So I remember Col de Perty was one stage we timed on, and it was a great experience. And then we did the same in Portugal as well. And I remember going to do just some pre-event testing. We arrive at Porto Airport, and I'd never been there before for the rally at all. And we get there, and Jim Porter was with Malcolm and myself. So we're coming to the airport now, and Jim was giving me the details. Right, this is where we're going. There's the map. I said, right, off you go then, Jim. He said, no, off you go. He said, you can take us there. So he knew exactly what the story was. So I jumped in the passenger seat, Malcolm driving, Jim in the back. We'd gone about 2 kilometers, and then I thought, hang on, something's not working here. That's when I realized that the maps in the UK were just so much better than other parts of the world. And quite literally, this map of Portugal, it was probably, you may as well have used it as toilet paper, really. And a lot of the names on the map didn't relate with the names on the villages. And Jesus, it was a nightmare. I went 30 kilometers the wrong one at one point, because I thought I was on the main road, but I should have slotted off to stay on the main road. And, there was all this going on. Jesus. And I learned very quickly that you can't take things for granted, and you have to concentrate at all times. And this was only a test, but it was a great experience, you could imagine.
How do you find the relationship? So when you're with the driver, how is your relationship? I mean, obviously it's pure business. When you're on the stage, it's all business. It's all about getting the result. But obviously you spend a lot of time together. You're traveling together. And the amount of time you spend between stages, getting to stages, is a lot. And obviously, do you find that? I mean, how is that relationship with them? Does it depend? Obviously, depends on the different people.
I think it does depend, Guy, literally on the individuals themselves. I'm not the kind of person to necessarily sit there and just say nothing, and just other than turn left, turn right, or park up. That's it. It's nice to have a bit of banter and a bit of chat.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of drivers, do like a bit of that. But you also have to realize that there's certain times, perhaps during an event, where it's best to shut up.
Yeah.
And just the basics.
Yeah, I bet Juha wasn't one for chatting, was he?
Not too bad, actually.
Yeah.
No, he wasn't too bad. And I think with Juha, and very similar with Colin as well, they were quite shy in their own way. If they knew you, it was a different kettle of fish. But and he would, like with journalists, would be dreadful with journalists. But when they built up a relationship with them, then it would be a different thing. Then they open up and be quite chatty. But Juha was quite good fun.
He wasn't that communicative with you, though, Nicky, at certain times. And this leads me on to a story which is one of my favourite rally stories. It is, because every time we have an interview, whether it's at the WRC in hospitality or on a special stage TV show, I always bring it up. But Juha didn't quite communicate with you some of the things that perhaps you would have liked him to before a certain rally in Finland one year. Can you tell us about that, please?
Okay, well, I mean, the whole situation with joining Juha, and we've skipped a few years now.
Yeah.
Because we'll come back.
We'll come back, yeah.
I basically was thrust into the seat with Juha. You know, we'd had a discussion at the end of 1992, the possibility of going into 93, and it didn't happen. He stuck with Juha Pirinen. So ultimately, I was stolen away because Juha Pirinen had an illness. Anyway, I was in the hot seat, and that was like whoosh, we're here. But I remember going to Finland now for the first time with him, and this was actually much later. This was 94, because in 93 I had to go back to my Mitsubishi contract and fulfill that with Thousand Lakes. So when I had over 12 months experience with you at that time, so I was comfortable with everything. But then when I went to do Thousand Lakes with him for the first time, I was shitting myself, because probably one of the worst events for a co-driver probably would be Finland, because it's so high speed and you've got these roller coaster gravel roads where you can literally jump into infinity. And some small crests you think aren't a jump, but probably the biggest. And I thought, my God, this is going to be terrifying, because he knows it so well, won it so many times. So we did the recce, and literally they all were together. So we had Tommy Mäkinen, Juha, Harry Rovanperä, and Tony Gardemeister. The 4 Finnish mafia of the WRC were wrecking together. So we literally ended up going boom, 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 twice around the route, 3 days or something. That was it. We'd done the whole route. And he said at the end of the 3rd day, he said, right, that's it. You're done now, he said. And I said, what do you mean we're done? He said, well, you're going to go to Helsinki now to play golf with Seppo Harjanne, Tommy's co-driver. And I said, well, are you finished the recce? He said, no, I go recce with the boys now. He said, I'm going with the boys. So they'd all sit with each other in each other's car. So they're all doing their own thing, talking about this crest, that crest. This is the line you take. You head to this tree on this jump, and then you land correctly in the corner. And, you know, so I basically tidied up my notes, went and played golf for a week. So now I turn up at the rally still not knowing 100% what's going to be happening. I couldn't settle into any normality. First stage, we drove out of Jyväskylä towards the airport, slotted right onto this narrowish road, long straight, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go, 200 flat crest and flat crest, 150. And it was something like a long K right and turn hairpin left. And then we went on to a much narrower road, a bit of a rough track forest road, and medium left, medium right over crest, and some trees had been felled on the right, and long medium right, 100. And we came down to what Juha would call a medium right, which is 45 degrees, into hairpin left and 90 right. So it was almost like a bit of a zigzag junction. So I'm calling medium right and hairpin left. So I'm waking down a couple of gears into the corner, hairpin left, and then I'd start again. He's going down this straight, and I thought, hang on, he's missed his note. You know, medium right, 90 left. And he just went straight on, straight through all these bushes, blasted straight underneath these trees as well. And we just leapt out the other side. And then it was like, what was it? Big panic. You know, reading the notes, trying to catch up again. And we turned hairpin left, right and left, and right and left, and about 3 Ks finished. I said, Jesus, you are. I said, what on earth was that all about? He said, oh, sorry, boyo, he said. I didn't tell you about this one. He said, don't worry, there is nothing as bad as that one. That is the worst one. But what they would do, you see, and this is how cunning they would recce by themselves, and then they'd park up if they saw something, and then they'd walk back, and they'd go and suss out what the lie of the land was like on a cut, in a corner, in some bushes and what have you. So they would have probably lifted stones, lifted any debris out of the way, not drive it, because if you drove it, everybody else on the recce could see the line. So they'd be lifting stones out of deep grass and all the rest of it. And they sussed this thing out, and he just literally straight on, flat. Jesus Christ, you could imagine. I thought it was sayonara. But my first rally with him, and to be honest, it was fairly painless, to be honest, because other than those moments, even though you're traveling at real high speeds, there was never a wheel out of place. The jumps were perfect. It is a very technical event. And I mean, on racetracks, I don't know if you get anything quite as technical as a Thousand Lakes kind of stage, really, where you take a crest flat on a certain line and angle to get a kink almost flat out straight after it, where the line is critical.
Probably the only place would be there's certain corners, but not a full event. I mean, the Nordschleife is one where the car goes light and you have to position it because it's going to land in a certain place. Places like the corkscrew at Laguna Seca, you pop over the corkscrew and you have to position the car because the circuit drops away. But yeah, and certainly not a full circuit would be anything to compare it.
But Finland was very much like that from start to finish. But honestly, it was just drama free. And literally after about 3 or 4 stages, I just settled down completely.
Yeah.
And it just wasn't an issue. It just wasn't an issue at all.
And anyone listening at home thinking, hang on, he said the recce took 3 days and the rally took how long? The sprint rallies that really the WRC is made, and most rallies are now, anyone that's into rallying now that wasn't into it in those days wouldn't comprehend that, would they? But they were marathons, weren't they, at high speed?
Yeah, well, I think, and somebody actually, I did see a tweet of somebody asked a question about how I would feel about doing modern day rallies.
Yeah.
And I think when you speak about the old days with the young drivers now, they probably are not going to be attuned. They're more attuned with what the rallies are now, and they don't know about the past. This for them is a World Championship rally. But certainly when you had 4 or 5 days of rallying, recce's of 2 to 3 weeks long, Monte Carlo was a mammoth recce because you're trying to find the right conditions and recce things at the right time of day to see the lie of the land, see what it's like. Youngsters nowadays wouldn't really understand what it was like. But, and I don't want to sound like my grandfather, but it was a lot better in my day, I feel.
Yeah.
But any youngster wouldn't know about that. And the World Championship now is a very different place. It's more about sprint, and the cars are a lot easier to drive, but you're still driving a lot faster and still taking it to those outer limits. And, it's all about sprint, go, flat. Where back in the day, you had to take your time.
Yeah.
And sometimes, winning championships is not about winning all the time. Sometimes it's about finishing second or finishing third, but making the best. And I think that sometimes perhaps some of these young drivers get too focused on trying to win everything. Colin was very much a try to win everything kind of guy, but Kankkunen was very much of, that boy's going well today. It's his rally. Boyo, we're going to finish second. Yeah. And he would collect the points, and he became such a brilliant tactician. And, that's why he was always sought after by teams.
Probably like Ogier today, isn't it? And before him, Loeb, really. They're always very good at doing enough. They either did, they'd either be dominant, or if they knew they didn't have the dominant performance, whether it be in themselves or in the car, they settled for the points and always, got on the podium second or third. And that's what racks up and wins championships, isn't it?
It is. And I say to any young driver that comes to me, and you could probably think about this as well, Guy, in many ways, when they're going to do a Fiesta championship in the world, JWRC, or if it's something in BRC, I said, right, you go back and you look at all the statistics of each year with each driver. And I guarantee you, the guy that wins the championship is not the fastest guy throughout the season.
Yeah,
just means the fastest guys just don't know when to stop.
Yeah,
the fastest guys always end up breaking the car, going off into the scenery, crashing, having so many retirements at the end of the year. They just don't have points to win the championship.
Like Richard Burns is another one, isn't he? Richard Burns was just like a metronome, just consistently quick, but not always the quickest, but just getting those results and ultimately bringing home the championship.
Yeah. There's a lot to be said for it. I mean, don't get me wrong. A manufacturer would always want the fastest driver out there. There's no doubt. But nowadays, with the costs of rallying and everything else, they don't want people writing covers off anymore.
We've seen it with Chris, haven't we? With Chris Meek.
Yes.
Very sadly, it just couldn't go on. It maybe worked in Colin's day.
Yes. I mean, Colin was very lucky through his career. When you think about it, David Richards stuck with him through thick and thin. And, he's probably got more body shells, wrecked body shells down to Colin than probably the whole of the rest of Subaru World Rally team. But he stuck with him because there was something there. And in the end, Colin sort of, overcame that when, just apply a little bit of different thinking. But, for me, a quick driver and a clever, fast driver, you probably find that a clever, fast driver will be a champion before a quick driver, unless they're reined in, pulled back, and give them a different way of thinking, a bit more of a tactician, a bit more, of how to play a championship, really.
Sounds like endurance racing guy.
Yeah, it does. It does. But it's interesting, like in terms of your legacy as well, though. If you look, we go back to Colin. I mean, although he didn't win the world championship, everybody, you can't help but not be a fan of his style. I mean, because you didn't know what was going to happen next. I mean, I'm sure you sat with him, but you didn't know what was going to happen next. But in some respects, that's what made it so, so great to watch. And yeah, maybe if he was a little bit more going for the points, he would have been world champion. But that's just, everyone's got a different style and way of doing it, haven't they? I guess.
But people loved Colin for that. They loved him.
Absolutely.
And he wore his heart on his sleeve.
Yeah, I mean, Colin McRae, a non-world champion, but driving as he did, or world champion doing it in a boring way. It might not be the same. Mightn't it? At the end of the day.
No.
But he got the championship obviously under his belt, didn't he? And after that, he just got sort of quicker, more flamboyant, it seemed, and he became a superstar because of it, didn't he?
Yeah, he did, and it was, although it was very spectacular, there was times where it used to get very sideways, but generally inside the car, it never felt like that, and I think I've been lucky enough to sat with two of the World Championship's most naturally talented drivers in Juha and Colin, and they were very similar in their own way, where inside it's just slow motion. The car is just moving. They're moving the car just enough without them having to correct it all the time and get it back online. And, it's none of that. It's just playing with it, and it's slow motion, and but outside you're going woof, flying.
Forgive me for flitting again, Nicky, and I know that we're not being very chronological here, but it's the stories that we all love about these kind of situations. 2001, Rally GB, you've described it in the past, both to me and in numerous times, as one of the most disappointing points of your career, that big accident. Firstly, just talk us through the physicalities of that accident before you tell us about, the impact on your career and how disappointing it was, because I love your description of this.
Well, we knew kind of what we needed to do. And it was literally just keep Richard Burns behind us. That's all that mattered. And I remember that we did the super special the night before down in Cardiff docks, and the weather was horrendous. It was wet and windy. But anyway, we were fastest after that stage. And we left Cardiff early on the Friday morning, and we drove up to Pontypridd and did a service. And we went into stage one, which is St. Gwynno. Which was a forest stage that's not used very often anymore, to be honest. But this particular stage has a very, very fast ending. And we were there just after daybreak. And, this was us, right, let's catch everybody asleep. So Colin, in fairness, it started into sixth gear and just held it there for a way. And then he kind of slowly builds up to this high speed, driving style of his, but he just got a feeling for it, and off we went. And we went through St. Gwynno stage, and the onboard footage, you'll probably search it out on YouTube for anybody after the show. 2001 Rally GB, St. Gwynno, spelled GWYNNO. And that stage is probably some of the best onboard you would ever watch in the commitment levels is just extreme. And you know, we got to the end of that stage and we had two Peugeots behind us, second and third. Now at that time, Peugeot was the force to be reckoned with because they had so much more power and it was difficult to keep up with them. But Richard was about, I don't know, 6-8 seconds behind us. So, right, that was fine. We got through that stage and then we did a little short stage taking us up on top of the Regos. And Marcus Grunholm beat us. And Richard was still took about 3 or 4 seconds, whatever it was, out of Richard. So now we're doing the road section after this stage, dropping downhill into Treorchy. And Cole's going, shit, fuck. Oh, what's wrong? And he said, well, Marcus Grunholm's beaten us. I said, well, does it matter? It doesn't matter, Cole. Listen, we're well on schedule. You know, we've beaten Richard on these 2 stages. We've already got over 10 seconds on Richard. I said, don't panic. I said, you know, let him get on with it. If Marcus Grunholm beats us, then that's fine. It doesn't matter. But oh shit, we've got to get 30 seconds just in case we have a puncture. Or I said, yes, get 30 seconds by the end of the day, but you're not going to get 30 seconds in one stage. Listen, we're in a nice rhythm. Let's just settle into what we've got. We've got something good here. Let's just keep it going. So anyway, that was it. Drove down into Treorchy, turned back right, and then we went into the forest on the opposite side of the valley. So obviously it was winter time, low cloud and everything else. And by the time we started this stage and get up onto the top of the hill again, some low cloud had come in, so it was fog. So Richard's quite good in fog because of his pace notes. And we'd had it before in 97 in a foggy stage early one morning in the dark, where Richard took a big lump out of us, 30 seconds or something.
He's very technical, isn't he, on his pace now? Was very technical.
Yeah. Oh, it was, you know, way beyond anything that Colin had. Colin was based more on speed, what he saw and what he felt, where Richard's was like flat left in, and flat left. And Colin would have long 6 left. You know what I mean? It was simple. But in the fog, when you lose your vision, then all of a sudden the pace notes become really important. And for Colin, because he couldn't see, he'd lose a bit of his speed. So we went into this fog, and we came out of the fog, and whoosh, then he started to push. And, you know, the cuts were getting deeper and, you know, on some of the corners and junctions. But it still felt okay. I knew we were on a mission. And we just had these series of flat 5th and 60th corners into a 6 left minus over crest cut. And, you know, these had to come a bit like a machine gun because we were traveling so quick. So 5 right plus and 6 left minus over crest cut, and he's coming into the 5 right plus. And he said he set the line, he set the car into the corner with a bit of a cut into the grass on the right. And he thought, no, this is okay, we're good, this will be fine. He said he had the opportunity to change the line, but he didn't. So we went in there, and what he couldn't see with the grass is that there was a bank on the other side. So effectively, he slams with the front right into this bank, set the car into the air and corkscrewing and twisting through the air. So, oh shit, so that was it, hold on. So bang, bing, bang, bosh. And, you know, there was trees, sky, ground, trees, sky, ground, and end over end, side over side, bing, bang, poof. And we landed up on the wheels, and steam billowing out the front. The bonnet was creased right up. The back, all the glass had gone out, and, you know, this thing was wrecked. The car was wrecked. There was no way we were going to carry on. So I didn't say anything. I just looked at him, and, you know, he got out, and he didn't say much at all, to be honest. He didn't say much for the rest of that morning. So that's the time to say nothing. But that was World Championship gone, unless Richard had some kind of bizarre retirement. That was it. Well, of course, all he had to do was get round really and pick up a few points at the end of it. But that was our World Championship gone, basically. But we've been so close so many times with Colin. We'd finished second twice, I think. Once we lost the World Championship by 1 point. Couldn't be any closer than that. Yeah. And if we had finished on equal points, we would have won because we had 6 victories. So, we'd come so close. But did it matter to Colin McRae? It probably did to him. Would it have made any difference to him and his fans? I don't think it made the slightest bit of difference.
What was the team reaction on that day? Because I know Malcolm was very guarded in his interview, and you could tell the disappointment, but he doesn't give much away in the interview.
No. Well, what's done is done, and you couldn't undo it. That was it. We were finished. And the World Championship had gone, and the team had put such a lot into it as well. You had to feel sorry for all our mechanics, our chief mechanic, Martin Wilkinson. They'd all worked so hard for this, and it had all come unstuck on this one corner. But, at the end of the day, that is motorsport. And, as much as anything else, a lot of your results could be based on luck, an element of luck. And unfortunately, the element of luck in rallying is far greater than you probably get in racing. We've got all those unknown elements being thrown at us on different events around the world, But at the end of the day, it was disappointing at the time. But I don't see that as a major low point, really.
Yeah, good.
You think he redeemed himself at the X Games when you guys went over to America and took the American audience by storm, and you had that famous roll in the Subaru and Impreza in the yellow car? Just talk us through that for anyone who's not seen it. It's on YouTube as well, and it's just Colin McRae and Nicky Grist all over.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it was a funny event, that, because it wasn't just in that stadium. It was a rally in the mountains just north of Los Angeles as well. But the American rallies at that time were using a pace note system made by a computer. So it's computer generated based on G-force sensors and rates and everything else. And they used a number system. But this number system was opposite to Colin's. So 6 was slow and 1 was fast. So we went in front of the stewards and just said, listen, this is completely different to what we used to. All these guys have used the system. They know what to expect. Can we reverse them? So can I take these notes and make your 1s a 6 and your 6s a 1? So at least we've got a chance of being able to compete. And I said, if I rewrite them, you can check in the morning, you can check whatever stage you want, and you can randomly pick a stage and just check. I said, I'm not modifying anything other than reversing these numbers. So they said, yeah, they allowed us to do it. So we thought, oh, that may help us a little bit. So the rally came, we started, and we were up against Travis Pastrana, as you know, and we went into this first stage. So we just had to see what the notes were like. We had no idea. So anyway, Colin got the other end. I said, what they like? He said, well, they're not the best, he said. He said, but let's see what times the other guys do. So Travis Pastrana time comes in. He's taken 12 seconds out of us. So Colin said, well, that's it then, he said. We're going to have to go, no matter what the notes are like. So we went into the next stage, which was even longer, and he pushed a bit harder in there. Look at me, Travis Pastrana had taken another 5, 6, whatever seconds it was. So he said, shit. So, it was only a question of getting used to these notes a little bit.
And the car, because it was a Group N car, wasn't it? So
yes, more or less. Yeah, more or less. Group N Subaru. And we were sponsored by a clothing company called No Fear. Yeah. I mean, perfect for Colin.
We're brothers.
Yeah, perfect for Colin as well.
Yeah.
So it went into this next stage, and it was really quite a fast stage. And it was all 5s and 6s, flat out stuff, big balls, kind of high commitment on gravel. Anyway, we get out, we were using this stage twice. So we got out the other end. Jesus, we took in something like a massive amount of time out of Travis Pastrana. Having used this stage twice, all of a sudden, we made this deficit, something like 2 seconds difference between us, going back to Los Angeles and then going into this stadium for the final stage. So we knew what we had to do. And it was a funny stage because it was in a proper football stadium. They'd taken the seating out in one corner and in the opposing corner on the other side of the circuit. And they built a ramp. So we drove down this ramp in over this jump with a big ravine. So you're committed to jump, hairpin right off the jump, round the mogul mounds in the middle, back up the circuit, the ramp the other side, out onto the car park lot, round the car park, all these different chicanes and hairpins, and in the drop-off point for the taxis at the front, and then through this other car park area where they'd made corners and slaloms and with water butts and barriers. So we had some split times, and bang, the split times were coming. Yeah, we were up. So then we're coming back now down into the circuit for the last time and jumped down this ramp into this big jump. And Colin said, right, we just wanted to give it a little bit of attitude on the jump. So when it landed, the car had the right momentum to almost turn immediately on the hairpin, so he could make the turn much quicker and faster. But he gave it a little too much, and when it took off, it was coming down kind of at 45 degrees on the front left wheel, but it popped the tire off the rim. So it bounced up, bounced again, and the rim dug in, and it started to roll, you see. So I thought, okay, this isn't too bad. It's got enough momentum. It's going to fall back on its wheels. And no sooner I thought that, what you could hear was chunk, first gear, rolling, and the throttle was flat out. So it was like, bop, 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 chunk. And the car rolled immediately on its wheels, bang, out came the clutch, and off we went. And of course, the whole stadium erupted. The noise in this football stadium was unreal. We could hear it in the car. So now we're trying to drag this car around these moguls with a front left puncture. And we went round the left, over the flying finish. And Travis beat us by a second, I think. Second half or something. So we were something like 2 seconds up. And we lost about 3.5 seconds with the roll. Well, of course, people thought Colin was just some fictitious person on a rally game. They didn't think he was real. Well, of course, it made national news on 2 channels at 6 o'clock news. This thing was massive. And no fear, we're absolutely delighted, as you could imagine. But that's when Colin arrived in America.
It was real fairy tale stuff back then, wasn't it? Your career then, Nicky, would it be fair to say that you've become this kind of famous figure as a co-driver, which we'd never seen before? Youngsters that were into rallying, it was always the driver, and all of a sudden, whether it was a combination of things like the X Games and the computer games, the Colin McRae rally and the Colin thing, I don't know what it was, but you've made yourself very accessible to the rally world since then. You've been involved organising events, you've been involved with the MS of the Motorsport UK Academy, you've been doing the computer stuff. Has that been your kind of mark on the sport, being so accessible and so involved in so many aspects of it? Is that what's helped you build sort of your status in the sport?
Maybe a little bit, maybe a bit. I think probably, if I think about it a little bit more, maybe the start of it was perhaps joining Colin at that time, because Colin, being such a shy individual in '97 particularly, I was in there, I was the new boy on the block, and, Colin didn't want to do interviews, didn't want to speak to the media. So he used to say, "Oh, Nick, you go and do it." So, I started to do a lot more end of day interviews, what happened on those 3 stages kind of interviews and all of this. So, all of a sudden I was talking on behalf of Colin. So I think I got a lot more TV time and air time because of that. And I think that was the start of it, really. And, I think there's now more than ever, I think, a co-driver, you can have a good co-driver But it's not just about co-driving anymore. It's about being a personality. It's about doing things correctly, talking well, present yourself well, and I think I always kind of did that, talking and presenting of myself quite well. And I think that's what's helped me through the years, I think, more than anything else.
I hope I'm not touching on a sensitive nerve here, but obviously Colin won the championship with Subaru with Derek Ringer. You then got involved, you were in the seat with Colin. He went back to Derek. I never quite knew what had happened there, or had you just decided you had to go in a different direction at this point?
Well, yeah. I mean, that was a time of, it was 2002, because obviously straight off the back of losing the World Championship, we went into 2002. Colin was really down. Colin was, was a bit fed up, and Malcolm brought us together up at his place and banged our heads together and said, come on, boys, that was stupid now, let's move on. And, we went on through the year, but, we got to New Zealand, and it was all in Rally New Zealand that, things came to a little bit of a head. And, we were on a stage called Fonga Coast, which is near a town called Raglan, and tricky little stage, tight and twisty up the side of the coast. And, there was one corner particularly, it was over a cattle grid and then down to a turn 3 right. And I remember it because we came up to this cattle grid and he said, what? Like, what's this? And I'd kind of already read it once, and I just went, 3! That's all I could say. I didn't have time to say 3 right, turn 3 right, nothing. 3, that's all I said. So he just went in quickly, bashed on the side of the cattle grid, came over this bit of a crest immediately into the turn, and just slid straight off and got stuck down a bank. And he never said anything. We tried to get out and we couldn't. He got out of the car, he got his jacket and his helmet, and got his mobile phone, and he was ringing on his mobile phone, and he stood on the bank for a while, and then he walked off. And that's why he stayed with the car until the stage ended. And he just walked to the end of the stage because we weren't far from the end, and he got somebody to pick him up. And I never saw him then for a few days. And I had an opportunity actually, because before the rally, there was the America's Cup boat race going on in Auckland at that time. And we went to meet the British team that were there. And the one guy said, if you ever want to have a ride on the boat, come give me a bell and I'll see what I can do. So they were going out to race one day, and they always take 2 boats out, the spare boat and the main race boat. And you're trying different masts and stuff. So they put me on as the 15th man or 16th man, I forget. But you stand at the back and watch it all going on. So I was full of this. I went out and had this opportunity and loved it. Anyway, the next morning, I had a phone call from a journalist in Australia to say, oh, we've had a rumour that you're not coming to Australia, but you don't know about it yet. And I said, you'd be right. I don't know about it yet. So I thought, what's going on here? So I thought, right, I'm going to pick up the phone and speak to Colin. So I picked the phone and spoke to him. I said, listen, Colin, I said, I've just had a phone call from a journalist in Australia telling me that I'm not doing Australia with you, but I don't know yet. And I said, that would be correct. And I said, I think we need to sit down and have a talk, don't you? And he said, yes. Okay. He said, give me an hour, I'll come and see you. So he came to the room in my hotel room in Australia, and we sat down, and he was really sheepish because he hated confrontation, Colin. And I said, he said, yeah, he said, I've been chatting with Dad and we've decided to go back to Derek. And I said, right, okay. I said, why is that? And he said, I just feel I need to change something. And I said, well, I disagree with you. I said, at the end of the day, I said, we're a very good team together. And I said, there's no reason why we can't continue. We just need to iron out this situation that's obviously there. And he said, well, I've made my decision now, and for this year, I'm going to go with it. And I said, well, listen, I said, I'm bitterly disappointed about it. I said, one, that obviously that we've, been together so much. And I said, I thought we could have at least discussed this before you made the decision and told somebody, because it's out there now. And I said, going forward, I said, you've made this decision, that's fine. But going forward from this point, I said, I am not going to be slagging you off for anything. And I said, I want you to tell me that you're not going to slag me off either for whatever reason. I said, you've made that decision, it's your decision. And I said, let's just move on from there. And he said, that's the way it is, he said. And, I agree. We won't say any more than what it is. And that was it, basically. So that was this year over and done with. So I just made some arrangements for my flights and changed my flight to come home. And, and then I had an opportunity to go and work for Speed Television in Charlotte. They were showing the World Rally Championship for the American market. So they asked me to go to Charlotte. So for Australia, I was doing the whole commentary for the World Championship from Australia, from Charlotte. And then, of course, Rally GB, I did the same again. So I was away from the rallies at that time, but it was strange seeing Derek in the car. And I don't know, I don't think they necessarily gelled that well. I always thought Derek looked quite uncomfortable in there, to be honest. But,
I think sometimes when you're under pressure, you get to that point where you feel like you need to make some kind of change. You almost get a little bit desperate. And I probably in that situation, we've seen it before with drivers and co-drivers. That's like it's an easy sort of thing to change, or not an easy thing to change, but it's one thing that you can sort of take out the equation. But I mean, you must have felt pretty hard done by, didn't you? I mean, obviously, you must have
at that time. I mean, I did a little bit. I was more disappointed than upset.
Yeah.
With the way that it had been handled. If they'd just been upfront and told me and discussed it, and Colin and Jimmy had come together and said, listen, Nick, this is what we're thinking because of this, this, and this, that's fine. But it was all done behind my back, really. And I thought we'd gone through enough, that they could have at least come and spoken to me. But as it was, that wasn't the way. But, having got involved in the TV, then in 2004 and 2005, I was going back to events with Speed Television and working for the TV promoter.
Yeah.
And I had a discussion in 2005 with a team manager of Skoda. And they said, listen, how do, obviously Colin went with Citroen in 2003, which I'd like to have gone to Citroen full time, awesome team at that time. And I never had that opportunity, but that's fine. But in 2004, it was, not 2004, 2005, they came to me and said, listen, how do you and Colin fancy coming to drive for Skoda for a couple of rallies? I said, well, what are you thinking? And they said, well, we're wondering whether you want to come and do Rally GB and Rally Australia for us. I think at that time, they put a lot of time and effort into that car, and I think they weren't getting much return from their investment, and they just wondered if Colin wanted to come back. So I said, right, well, leave it with me. Let me make a few phone calls. So I spoke to Colin and I said, listen, this is the opportunity. I said, how do you fancy doing a couple of rallies for me with Skoda? And he said, yeah, that doesn't sound too bad. I said, well, do you want to take this forward then? And he said, yeah, I don't mind. And so I gave him the contact details. And so that was it, 2005, we were back together again. And Colin had been doing literally nothing for 2004 and 2005 other than playing around and stuff. And, off we went. And then we were back together as a team again, and we fell straight back in like it was, 2001, really, 2002. It was like we'd never parted. So, and it was as good as it ever was, really.
That's fascinating. At the time, I remember those things happening without knowing quite why. So thank you for being so honest about that. I think there'll be people listening at home that would have, like me, been sat there kind of living that with you just then. I think it's the way you.
Well, I think there probably would have been maybe things that had been brewing in his mind and winding him up, and and like Guy said, just felt that a change would help him for whatever reason, and those pressures as a co-driver, you can't understand really, because, you know, if you win or you lose or you crash, it's not down to the co-driver. Yep. Most of the time it's down to the driver. So those pressures are different to what I experience. So, you know, that's maybe right. But, you know, that aside, you know, I didn't hold any grudges. In 2003, we were talking, we were fine. But in 2005, we got back together and we did our World Championship together in 2006 in Turkey with Citroen. So, you know, in many ways, it was, you know, it was great to get back in the car again.
Yeah. Now, anyone watching this on YouTube, if you're listening on the podcast, this won't make the best radio, I'm afraid, because behind Nicky is a fantastic array. In fact, behind Guy, if you haven't watched the YouTube, is a fantastic array of artifacts as well, including some helmets which have come from Nicky Grist's company, NG Motorsport, actually. But behind Nicky is a fantastic array of trophies. We just have to touch on those, Nicky, and it's an excuse for anyone listening on the podcast to have a look at Spinning Wheels podcast on YouTube. And even if you flick to this part of the video, you can have a look at all these trophies and Nicky as well in all his glory. And there's some photos of the 555 Subaru team I can see behind you as well. Just talk us through a few of the artifacts, if you would, Nicky.
Yeah, well, basically on that top shelf there, that's all the FIA trophies. So those are finishing. I think this one here, does that line up with that blue?
It does, yeah, that's the FIA, yeah.
That was 1994 World Championship, I think, where we finished fourth with UR. This one was 1997, where we lost the World Championship to a point to Tommy McKinnon. This particular one is for finishing third in the World Championship in 1998. And I think this one was 2000 or 2001, finishing second place. And then there's various other ones, just Rally Australia. But, you know, trophies tend to be wild things in the World Championship because everybody's trying to do their own thing. And it's funny how you know, people have different idea of what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. And I want to show you something now in a minute. I've got a far greater selection up in my offices in where my business is, because I've got the space to put them out. But here is just some different stuff. So just wait there a sec. Now, your first win on the World Championship is always important. Now, my first ever win, and we didn't discuss that actually. We've got to go back and discuss all of this. But the first win I did was plucked out of the blue, where I was, you know, just drafted in last minute to shoot to Argentina with UR Kankkunen. And, you know, the story we'll talk about. But this is what I won in Rally Argentina, okay? Now, I don't know whether you'll be able to get all this in. Now, we can't read
what it says from there.
Well, it's Trofeo de something Argentina. But just look at the size of this thing. It's massive. It's about 3 feet tall. It's a ginormous thing.
It's almost as big as you, Nicky, to be fair.
It's almost. Although I'm a bit wider than it now. but this obviously was, wow. Christ, I won my first World Championship event, and this is what I won. So that was brilliant.
That's a great trophy.
Yeah, in the same year, I won 3 events. I won Rally Australia, which I don't think I've got. A Rally Australia trophy here. Yes, here we are. So I won Rally Australia, and that's what I won for Rally Australia. Something a bit different, pretty solid aluminium, purpose made with some nice marble base. And then this same year, I ended up doing Wales Rally GB. So UHA ended up buying off my contract and winning the World Championship. And so we turn up in Wales Rally GB with UHA as, well, it was actually the Network Q Rally at that time, with UHA was world champion. So we were in Birmingham, the conditions were cold, it was really icy out on the stages and snowy in some places. So it was a really difficult rally, really difficult. And, you know, the conditions for UHA to drive must have been horrendous, but he made it look so simple. Had a couple of wild slides and we got away with a few. One of them up in Yorkshire, not far from you actually, in Cropton Forest.
Yeah.
Gate post pretty badly and smashed the back arch. anyway, we ended up getting back to Birmingham and winning the rally by 2 minutes and 40 seconds or something. So, Jesus, I've even won my first home round of the World Championship. So, right, trophy now. What are we going to get for the trophy? Now, this is the trophy. Look at that. That is my winning trophy. So I go up a bit closer there. So you've got a little plaque on there which sort of says Network Q Rally, first overall, Toyota Turbo, you are Kankkunen driver, Nicky Grist co-driver. Look at that gold thing on the top of it. I mean, would you be proud in showing that?
That's like the equivalent of a sort of blankety blank checkbook and pen, isn't it? It's kind of, you know.
I think you'd be far happier having a blankety blank checkbook.
I think the boardroom had far too much of a hand in that, didn't they? At Network Q, I think they got too involved.
Yeah, but you know, all right. It doesn't matter about the trophy, really.
It's the funny story, though. It's those stories that make the character of it all, isn't it?
But it's those memories. When you look at the trophy, you think about the event and all the stuff that's gone on, which is nice. It's still nice to have, isn't it? But yeah.
I think that's the most emotional you've been on the entire podcast, actually, Nicky.
But there's other stuff in here, some different stuff. I was quite honoured to get this. This was a glass tower. We went, when having won the World Championship in 1993 with Toyota, they flew us to Japan, where we did a tour of the factories, and we went to the headquarters of Toyota. So when you were going to the management area, every floor you go up in the offices, the shag pile carpet gets deeper and deeper and deeper, and there's less people that you see. So we walked into Mr. Toyoda's office, and he presented us all with these trophies. What's it say on here? It's in gold. In appreciation of your contribution in TTE, WRC manufacturer's title, and your driver's title, 1993. Tatsuro Toyoda, president. So that's lovely to have something like that.
Yeah, it is.
You know, because you know that you know obviously meant something to them, but to go into this deep shag pile carpet and leather seats was quite funny, but most bizarre place, meeting all these directors of Castrol, and you know, they'd fall asleep. You'd go in there to see them, and they'd fall asleep at the table. This one director fell asleep. I went to UR. I said, he's asleep. He said, it's normal. It's normal, he said. And this guy gone.
Oh, wow.
Asleep. You'd think he'd at least stay awake to see us, wouldn't you? But anyway, that's just some trophies. But yeah.
Just a reminder, if you're listening to this on the podcast, you need to have a look at that bit, at least on YouTube, at the Spinning Wheels Podcast YouTube page, because that's actually quite a story. I wasn't expecting that, Nicky. That was good.
Well, there you go. That's something a little different. And you know, that Network Q trophy lives up in my office, actually. So I've brought that home specially for you guys today, but the big trophy stays here. But
so we need to go back, Nicky. We need to go all the way back. And as I said, we are darting around a little bit here, but we did say we'd come back to the Mitsubishi days. Maybe you could tell us
before that even.
Okay.
Before that. And I want to talk. Do you boys want to just listen and just let me talk?
Go for it. Yeah.
Sounds good to us. And everyone at home is going, yes, please.
I just want to talk to you about, and maybe perhaps this is one of your questions, Paul, that you've got there, about my favourite rallies and my favourite place to go rallying. And after Malcolm Wilson, we had 2 years with Boreham, a little bit of up and down, but in terms of results, but great time. But I had an opportunity to join Toyota, and it was instigated by my manager. He said, listen, this is a good step forward. He said, from here, you just don't know where you go. He was also UHA's manager, so this is how this whole thing intermingles. And, you know, he said, listen, there's a guy, Mikael Eriksson from Sweden, you know, needs a co-driver, and Uwe Andersson would like you to come along. But he said, you know, it's a limited program. He said, you're just going to get 3 rallies. He said, Safari, Acropolis. I can't remember what the third one was. I'll have to check my contract. Argentina or GB, I think. And he said, you're just doing 3. But he said, the first one, Safari, he said, you're going to be doing all the test and development for the new Celica. He said, so, you know, it's quite a big job for Africa. And the thing is, for the Japanese, Safari Rally is renowned as being the toughest rally in the world. And for any manufacturer to win it, especially a Japanese manufacturer, you know, it really was something very special for them to win that event. So I've basically went to do San Remo Rally, and basically I'd made an agreement before San Remo that I was going to go, but I hadn't told Malcolm. So I thought, right, I'm not going to tell him before the rally. I'm going to tell him after the rally, because I want to give him the best chance possible and all the rest of it. And as it was the best result we'd had with the Sierra at that time. But anyway, we went down, did the start, went over the start, and we drove down to this super special they put together down on this wasteland that they were recovering some land from the sea. And they made this super special on it. Anyway, we were there before the start, and we had something like 15, 20 minutes. Anyway, I was doing something, and Armin Schwartz went up to Malcolm before the stage and said, well, I see Nicky's coming to Toyota next year with Mikael Eriksson. So I'm unaware of this conversation, but of course, then the story was out, you see. Excuse the phone, Mrs. will get that. And so, of course, we did the stage. Malcolm didn't say anything. He said, we put the car in park for me. He said, you're going to Toyota next year. Shit. Yes, I am. I said, I am going. I said, listen, I was going to tell you, but I didn't want to tell you until after the rally. I said, how did you find out? He said, Armin Schwartz just told me, who was driving for Toyota at the time. Well, he was not happy. Poor Elaine, him and Elaine had a massive argument in the hotel room because they were in the room next to us. So there was my wife and I there thinking, oh shit, what have we done? There's all this racket going on. Malcolm was upset. And anyway, it was done. The deal was done. But I did Rally GB, and then literally no sooner I'd finished Rally GB, TT said, right, come on, off you go. And we went straight to Kenya in early December. So I flew there. Mikael had already been there a few days. He picked me up from the airport, went to a hotel in Nairobi, had a shower. He said, bring some kit. He said, we're going to be away for a couple of weeks. So he said, just bring a couple of weeks worth of stuff and loads of pace notebooks and stuff. Right, okay. Down to the workshop, went to this workshop, and there must have been about 40, 50 people in there, of which probably 40 of them locals, 10 TT people, engineers and stuff. And then there was one of these brand new 185 Celicas, which is my favorite rally car, as you know. And, it was all ready to go. So Dargo, the engineer, said, here's your route, here's the pace, here's your tulips. He said, we want you to drive down to this point. He said, use this set of notes, these roads, these tulips, make pace notes on this because we're going to be testing in this area for a couple of weeks. So, and off we set. So we jumped in this rally car, flat out down this main road out of Nairobi, past the airport, through this police check, and he didn't even bother stopping. The policeman dived out of the way. I said, Jesus, there was a police check. Don't worry, he said, we're a rally car, it's fine. Off we went into the sunset. Giraffes, bloody zebras crossing the road. Then there were some monkeys and baboons, and like, Jesus, this is wild. Eventually get to where we needed to go and set off into this stage. Well, I'd never seen conditions like it. It was horrendously rough, and wash away, keep left around wash away. What's a wash away? I had no idea. So I'm just there scribbling away, sweat pouring out of me. And these bits of paper eventually ended up on my legs, sweating and all breaking up into pieces. And we got onto this bloody big rounded boulder. I said, whoa, stop. I said, this can't be right. I said, this is just a big stone. I said, are we on the right road here? He said, yeah. He said, I think I've been here before. He said, I've used this before. And I said, right, well, may as well just carry on. But, you know, the whole experience of this, seeing these wild animals, these incredibly rough roads, you know, lie of land like I'd never seen. And we drove then to our hotel, which was just down the road. Salt Lick Lodge it was in Savo Safari Park. And then we stayed in a campsite for 3 nights. And, you know, we were locked in there and we had all this entertainment just for us, people coming in, singing, Maasais jumping 4 foot in the air, you know, wild experience. And I thought, Jesus, this is brilliant. You know, how could somebody not like doing this? And we spent 2 weeks there. And honestly, it was the most awesome experience. But we had months of this and going the length and breadth of the country. We had 5,000 kilometers long, the rally was. Sections were timed to the minute there, not to the second or tenths of the second that you get nowadays. But you're dealing with sections of, you know, 120 miles long, 170, 180 kilometers, horrendous conditions, making your way through deep rivers, no bridges, and just coming out the other side, water billowing over the roof, and, you know, mud holes like you wouldn't believe, slamming into the things, rock faces, and having to go up a steep vertical rock face and trying to make the best of it. And, you know, the whole experience was just wonderful. And from that point on, there was only one rally for me in the World Championship, and that was Safari Rally. It was such a great experience. And, you know, that rally didn't end well for us. We rolled on the first day. We did finish, but the dust, and covered in dust for 5 days, was hellish, because the dust coming in was unreal. But you know, I just loved Safari, and it became very much a part of me. And I think if nobody has got anything on their bucket list like a safari, go to Africa and experience what it's like, the local people, the smells, the temperatures, the lie of the land, the Great Rift Valley, the coastline down in Mombasa, Savo Park, the elephants that have been wildlife, the leopards in the trees, and, you know, and all of a sudden there you are in a rally car, and you're a part of that. You know, you're in the cage, they're in their normal habitat. It was just a wonderful experience, and Safari seriously touched me. And I didn't, you know, we finished, what did we finish? I think we finished fourth, third or fourth, after a while. And I remember it's, you know, there was 26 pace notebooks, and, you know, the timing was really quite tricky, and you had to, some sections you weren't going to beat the time allotted for that section. There's other times where you could beat the time, but you use that time for servicing, and all this sort of, it was a whole different experience to normal rallying at that time. But and I think most people that have rallied in Africa at that time would really appreciate the event. And when I saw of late how they were going to reintroduce Safari Rally into the World Championship, you knew 100% it was not going to be anything like Safari.
Yeah.
There was no way was it going to be like that, because one, I don't think they could probably build cars tough enough. The teams didn't have the money or the budget to go and develop whole new chassis and suspension pickup points and suspension parts. And, you know, if you hit a little antelope with one of those cars, because they're plastic, the whole front of the car would just explode. Do you know what I mean? You'd end up without a front on the car, you know, and it was going to be some watered down little kind of stage event on Lord Delamere's estate in Elementaita. I think that's basically what Safari was going to be. And when you think of all the people that had won it over the years, of the pressure and of trying to get to the end of a section in wet, muddy conditions, and just making the best of it, I thought it kind of waters down those achievements of those drivers back in the day to have somebody win Safari Rally, called Safari Rally, but it was probably the length of 2 sections, in the old days. And it was a great experience, but TT took it very, very seriously. And I remember after this test down in Savo Country Park, and we went back to Nairobi, and Dargo said, boys, come to the airport with me. So we go to the airport, and there was this bloody great Antonov plane had arrived from Germany. So the front of the plane was, the nose came right up on the front, and they lowered the thing down. This ramp came out. So in there was a brand new rally car again, because we'd done a recce of the rally at that point. So we'd done the test and 5,000 kilometer recce of the route. Then this plane arrived. Out came a brand new rally car, prepared with the stuff that we'd just been testing with some changes. 2 service vans, 2 Land Cruiser chase cars, roll cages, all prepped with spares and bits and pieces in, and a helicopter was in this Antonov. So the helicopter was to fly with us all the time to warn us of animals and cars and people and all the rest of it. And these service vans and chase cars were for us then to do a high-speed test. And a high-speed test was recreating the whole rally with the timings and everything else. So when we dropped time, but when we had service time, if we had 5-minute service, you'd service for 5 minutes. And then the vans would go on to a point that they could be ahead of us. And then off we go again. Then we'd service the car again for 8 minutes. And then maybe we'd have a chase car service for 2 minutes with just fuel, and off we go again. So, we recreated the whole rally, and we did that twice.
Wow. Using
the helicopter, the spotter, and everything. So we must, and then we did, then the team arrived, which was Carlos and Marco Allen, and then we had to do 2 loops of recce again. Now it took you 7 days to get round 1 loop, to do 1 complete loop. So we went and did it. So we did it once recce. We'd done 15,000 kilometers before we went to start the recce. So then we did another 5,000 kilometer route, and Mikhail decided to go down to the coast to Mombasa to go on holiday. He didn't want to go round the loop again. And unfortunately, that was his downfall, because Uwe Anderson really took offense to that. He didn't like that at all. And after Safari, he lost his job. He never drove again. I never did any other rallies with TT in '92, other than doing some service schedule work, which was a great experience.
Yeah.
But, I remember that for the last week, I just sat in the hotel. I'd prepped everything. I was ready to go. But Lewis Moyer went down with a really bad fever. And, he couldn't move. He was in bed. So Carlos, being the consummate professional, was pacing up and down the swimming pool. And he said, shit, he said, I've got this 250 kilometer section near a place called Sultan Hamid, I think it was called, off the Mombasa Road. He said, we haven't even made the notes for that, he said. I've got the, we said we're going to do that. We're going to do it as a complete loop and do it a couple of times together. And I said, well, listen, I said, I can't obviously write Spanish pace notes, but I said, listen, I know exactly where I'm going. I said, we've got the recce car. Why don't we go and buy a tape recorder and loads of tapes and batteries? I said, I'll show you the way to go. And I said, you just dictate the pace notes straight onto tape. And then Lewis can have the tape recorder and he can rewrite them lying in bed with fever. He said, shit, that's a brilliant idea. I said, that's a brilliant idea. So, half an hour later, he comes back, right, sorted. He said, let's go down to town. So we went to town, shopping around Nairobi, trying to find one of these old, really oldie worldy tape recorders. Flip up with the cassette goes in and all these batteries. And I had to look, make sure that the tape hadn't run out. anyway, and off we set. So went down to the workshop the next morning, and we went off and did this 250-kilometer section. And I always remember, right, this is where the stage started here, Carlos. So when there was something dodgy on the road, but right, careful here, wash away or a ditch or something. So then he's going blah 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 blah. Uno, dos, frenando, derecha, sinistra, He was all rabbiting on, going like hell. And he was flying. He was flying in this rally car. And a couple of times we ended up just hitting things, and it was just boom, bang, boom. No, Lewis. Okay, we go again. Right, go. So, but he said when he went to check them, they were the best pace notes he'd ever made because he could do it at speed, and he didn't have to think about the co-driver writing the notes. He said they were the best notes he'd ever made. He said he made hardly any changes. But anyway, I helped Carlos go on and win that rally at least. So there was something good came out of my services on that event. But you imagine the whole experience of that guy.
Yeah.
All these staying in Lake Baringo up in the north, and they water on the side of this lake, and the sprinklers are going all day, growing the grass. And they got these little huts where you sleep in, and then there's the main complex. And at night, when you want to go back to your room, you have to have this security guard take you, and he walks you to your room. And if you give him a couple of shilling, like 20 shillings or something, which is next to nothing, at night he'd give you a knock on the door to say to come and have a look, because in the lake was hippos.
The watering hole.
Yeah, it was. They basically all lived in the lake, but they used to water the grass because then the hippos would come in at night to eat the grass. So then he'd wake you in the middle of the night, and then you'd be sitting on your little tiny balcony, and then there's these massive hippos, like ginormous things. You don't believe how big they are. And I mean, it was like, Jesus Christ, this is brilliant. One of those life's experiences, but you were being paid to be there. And,
From picking up that Lombard sign on that lamppost when you got back from school as a kid to sitting on your edge of your balcony watching hippos, having done a rally prep for a safari winning rally for Carlos Sainz. That's,
yeah.
Oh, do you know what I mean? The whole thing is just awesome. Just awesome. And I think one of my, I did some service schedule work, as I said, and moving on from safari, I literally had nothing else to do. And then Uwe rang me and said, Nick, would you come and help us make some service schedules? So I said, yeah, fine. He said, Jürgen Bertel, who was their coordinator, was going to leave. And he said, would you go to Acropolis and work with him in Acropolis Rally? And then we want you to go to Argentina to do it by yourself. Make the service schedule. Simple enough task, you would think. When you think of nowadays, where you've got one service park, you've got all these vehicles just parked there, all these people parked there. But, Acropolis Rally, I get there. Jürgen said, right, where do you want to go? I said, hang on, you're supposed to be showing me the ropes here. I said, I know what a service schedule is. He said, well, you tell me what we've got to do. And I said, well, obviously you've got an idea. So we chatted through it. But you have to coordinate 15 service vans, which were fully laden with everything. We had 6 tyre trucks just carrying the tyres. We had 2 motorhomes. We had a workshop truck. We had 2 measurement trailers to check the track of the car. We had 6 mechanic cars. We had something like 2 or 3 Land Cruiser chase cars. We had management vehicles, doctors' vehicles, and 2 helicopters as well, carrying the main mechanics. So then you had to try and coordinate all of this to make sure that you had full coverage all the time in every place. And then there was some of the service vehicles were like big man 4x4 trucks, which, would go to the rough mountain passes where you wouldn't get a normal service van up, and little Toyota Hilux trucks with big bodies on the back which carry spares, which allow them to go to the end of stage services. And you try and pull all this together into like 100 service points to cover the rally. And it was that was a tremendous learning curve for me. And, I did enjoy that. And then, during Acropolis, I remember just north of a place called Itea, in the northern part of the route, and there's these series of lakes that they built up to supply Athens with water, and there was a lot of stages coming in and around these lakes. We were coming down through this one mountain, and I looked up, there was a stage and road section on this hillside on the left. I said, "Oh, service 6 is a bit late." He said, what do you mean? I said, "Well, he should have been over the top of that hill by now, and we can see him." And he said, "Who's in service 6? And I said, "Oh, it was Paddy, somebody or other, and Seamus, somebody, 2 Irish boys." He said, "Oh, bloody typical Irish," he said, "typical Irish." Anyway, next minute, these 2 boys came over the top of the hill, just as we finished talking about it. I said, "Oh, no, that's okay. They're going to make it. They've got time enough." He said, "Fair play, Nick." He said, "You're quite good at this, aren't you?" I said, "To be honest, Uwe," I said, "I'm a much better co-driver, to be honest." And I said, "I want to co-drive. I don't want to be doing this on a full-time basis." He said, "No, I can understand. I can understand." So anyway, after that rally, I went and did Argentina, recce, all by myself, the whole shebang. And it takes 2 weeks of recce to pull it all together, and then 2 weeks of putting it all into paper. And we didn't have computers and spreadsheets. Everything was hand-drawn and typed out onto sheets. And, so there was a lot of information, road books for the vans from service point to service point. Anyway, Uwe, at the end of my contract, Uwe rang me up and said, "Nick," he said, "I've spoken to Mike." He said, "I haven't got an opportunity for you in the team next year. Although I did have a conversation with UR Kankkunen at some point, but in the end he decided to stick with UR Pirinen. But he said, Armin Schwarz wants a co-driver. He said, he's moving to Mitsubishi." So I said, "Oh, right, okay." So in the end, I had a conversation with Armin and I had a contract then. And next minute, I'd gone from Ford, Toyota, now Mitsubishi. And so I ended up joining Armin for some testing early part of the year and doing Monte Carlo, Portugal, Finland, 2 others, which I didn't end up doing because after UR Pirinen had his brain hemorrhage, which is the reason why I had my opportunity with Juha. Juha said that one evening UR Pirinen didn't turn up for dinner. And he thought, "Oh, maybe Piro's got something on." This is during the recce. Next morning, he got up for breakfast. Still no UR Pirinen. Shit, what's happened? So anyway, he got the manager to open up the hotel room, and UR Pirinen was lying on the floor in his hotel room, and he'd had quite a serious brain hemorrhage. And they had the team doctor there, Dr. Gustafsson. They checked him out, and he looked. He could see what the story was and exactly where this pressure. And they did an emergency operation to relieve some pressure. How he knew, I don't know, but relieved this pressure. Anyway, rushed him off to hospital. But of course, it left Juha in a position where he needed a co-driver. I mean, there was no point in stopping. He said to me that Piro wouldn't have wanted me to stop. So he got on to Mike Greasley. Mike Greasley then made some arrangements, and I was lying in my bed upstairs, sleeping quite nicely on a limited 5 rally program, 7 rally program. And next minute, phone goes. Pick the phone. "Hi, Nick, it's Mike." "Oh, hi, Mike. How are you going?" "Not too bad." "You fancy doing Argentina?" I said, "Yeah, I would." But I said, "Hang on, it starts next week sometime, the end of next week." He said, "Yeah." He said, "Listen," he said, "it's not good news." He said, "It's UR Pirinen's had a brain hemorrhage, but UR wants you to go." And I said, right, that's fine. But I said, what about my contract? And he said, well, listen, don't worry. He said, I've already made a phone call. Uwe has been involved as well. And just pack your bags ready to go. He said, you'll be going to do, take your helmet and bits and pieces. He said, you'll be going to do Argentina, and then straight from there going to do Rally New Zealand as well. So I said, right, fine, that's great. So I've rung up the wife who was in work. I said, bloody hell, darling, you never believe what I've just had. I said, buddy, wants me to go and join him to do Rally Argentina and then New Zealand. I said, Pirinen. She said, oh, that's brilliant. That's fantastic news. And she said, poor old Pirinen. I said, yeah, it is sad. I said, I don't know what the current situation is, but I said, listen, I'm just waiting for a phone call that Toyota will, Mitsubishi will let me go from my contract. So I said, if I'm going, I said, I'll give you a call. So anyway, an hour later, Mike Greasley said, right, job's on. He said, you need to get to Heathrow Airport for 1:30. He said, pick up your tickets there. So I said, oh, brilliant news. Thanks, Mike. So I rang the wife, went to see her in Newport down the road here. And she came out for 10 minutes and kissing a cuddle in the car park and said, right, darling, bye. Whoosh, 6 weeks, I'm gone. And I remember up to Heathrow, picking up my ticket from the British Airways, where I had to go then fly to Paris. Then in Paris, I had to go to another ticket desk to get my airline to go take me into Buenos Aires and out to Cordoba. So I get to Paris, pick up his ticket. Jesus, first class ticket. Oh, Jesus, I've made it big time now. I mean, you are being a 3-time world champion was one thing, but a first class ticket. This is fantastic news. Well, of course, you could imagine me on this plane. You know, there was no way I was going to sleep. I mean, I was going to be having the full service, the steak, the caviar, the Krug champagne. I didn't get off the plane pissed, but I didn't sleep much that night with the excitement of it all as well. So then I arrived in Buenos Aires. Somebody picked me up from the airport, run me across town to a small regional airline, flew up to Cordoba, and then somebody took me to the hotel. And I get into the hotel lobby in Villa Carlos Paz. And there's Juha sat at the bar, had his breakfast, but there was coffee cups. There was an ashtray full of his little tiny cigars he loved to smoke. And there was some road books and pace notebooks. He said, quick, he said, we haven't got much time, he said. We're going to have to go recceing. I said, right, okay. I went to my room, quick shower, change, bang, into the car. And we managed to do literally every stage twice. So, and it was a bit hurried. And then we had to fly from there up to a place called Tucumán, which is a lot further north, where the rally was officially starting from there, with a super special, a 2-car super special. And we ended up being quickest on this super special. So now I've been thrust from my bed on my Mitsubishi contract, flying to Argentina first class, recceing with a 3-time world champion in a factory Toyota, to then leading my first world championship rally after the stage 1. And we went through the next few days of never losing first place. You know, we were running first on the road. It was some mornings it was very still and dusty, which helped protect the lead. And Mickey Biasion tried his best. And then the last day, so now I'm really nervous now. This is the last day, and we're leaving 5 o'clock in the morning from Villa Carlos Paz to go to Parc Ferme in Cordoba. So the road's pretty quiet, and the rental cars were dreadful there, but the team manager had this Renault 9 saloon thing. So anyway, we jump in this car, and it's dark, going up this dual carriageway towards Cordoba. Next minute, this car starts lurching, you see. So shit, what's that, George? Oh, don't worry, everything's okay, it'll be fine. So then he's driving a bit further, the car starts jumping again. Now, Didier Oriol, I was in the front. I was sat in the back between Oriol and his co-driver, Bernard J. So I leant forward to look at the petrol gauge. I said, George, there's no petrol in this thing. He said, no, it's fine, he said. It's fine, he said. I've been here before, he said. There's loads of fuel in it. I said, loads of fuel in it? I said, listen to the thing. I said, it's not even running properly. I said, turn around now. Let's get another car. I said, we've got time enough. No, Nick, he said, don't worry about it. The car starts jumping again. So I'm beginning to lose it now. And then next minute, UR chirps up and said, don't worry, Boyle. It'll be fine, he said. Once we go over the hill, it's mostly downhill to Cordoba. I said, downhill? I forget how far it was now exactly, 16 or 20 kilometers. I said, listen, this is a long way to go. I said, we're leading the rally. I said, you can't. George, go and get another car. It'll be fine. The car's bouncing and lurching. And Didier chirps up, it'll be fine, Nick. Don't worry, don't worry. Anyway, eventually we get to Parc Fermé. So I said to George, I said, I'm sorry, but that was seriously bad. I said, if you call yourself management, I said, you could have lost us the rally there. He said, no, don't worry, Nick. He said, it didn't have a petrol gauge when I picked the car up. He said, I filled it up last night. So all these bastards now were in on this. And they were all winding me up. And we got to Parc Fermé. Shit. I did laugh about it. I didn't laugh, but Christ, you could imagine. I was on with my first event and running out of petrol. Well, I believe it. But when it did.
That's great. That's brilliant. There's such great stories. Such great stories.
But then that was the whole UR thing, and we went off, and then I went back to Mitsubishi and went back to him, and and then the whole Toyota era was fabulous as well. I mean, great team and all the experiences that came along. And of course, there's the dreaded year in 1995, which I don't know whether you know about it, but would you remember that year, Paul, that I'm on about?
The big one.
1995, when we were leading the World Championship. Colin was world champion, wasn't he? And what happened that year?
I know the story roughly, not enough to recount.
Shall I lead the way?
Yeah, lead the way.
Well, basically, in 1993, we went on to win the World Championship with UR. And then in 1994, we started the year in the 185 Celica. But Toyota had a new model coming out, the 205, which was a lot longer car, a lot sleeker looking vehicle. And they wanted to basically us to use that and develop it. So in 1994, we went over to using this car, but it wasn't necessarily as good as the 185. But Didier stuck with the 185 car and had started to win a few rallies, and we had some issues with suspension and this, that, and the other. So eventually, Didier went on to win the World Championship in Rally GB with us, beating Carlos on Rally GB to steal some points off Carlos, which would have meant he would have won the World Championship. So, something good came out of 1994. But 1995, we all had to move over to this new 205. And a lot of time and effort had been spent in developing this car. Suspension, which is superstrut suspension, which in theory was a brilliant idea, which it meant that no matter where the wheel was in its travel on the front, the caster and the camber would always stay at what you set it at, which was fine on paper, but in rally terms, there were so many joints and arms and stuff, it ended up you just have this much free play in the car. So they scrapped it all, and we went into the World Championship. We didn't win another rally for TT with that car, and it was hard work. It wasn't like the old 185, but you are being the brilliant tactician. We went through the year picking up thirds and the odd second and maybe a fourth or fifth, and but we got to the end of the year and we came to Rally Australia and we were leading the World Championship, you see.
Had you been aware, by the way, of what was to come? Had you guys known what was happening? Or I know we're going to get to it. I'm not going to spoil the surprise, but just interested to know if at this point, as you're telling the story,
No, well, we didn't know anything. At this point, we knew nothing of what was going on behind the scenes. So basically, we went into Rally Australia. We did day one, fine. Colin was leading and went on to win that rally. But we ended up, I think we were second overall again. So we went to the Super Special in Langley Park, which was right on the side of the Swan River. 2-car Super Special, starting on a dual carriageway on the side of the park. Standing start, flat out, and then turn into the park where we had this gravel loop with a bridge and a jump, and then back onto the tarmac and crossover and all the rest of it. And we had a service immediately before, which was right next door to the Super Special stage. There was these thousands of people there. The whole world was there. The FIA were there. All the teams were there. You know, this was the spectacle of the event. So anyway, the one engine guy came up to us and said, right, guys, you see this switch here? We want you to flick this switch 5 seconds before you start. We said, right, fine. What's this then? They said, oh, well, we've got this new evolution of the engine, and this is a different map, and we want you to try it here. Like, okay. So, right, got to the start line. I forget who it was. I think it was a Ford, I think, of some kind, maybe Armin. And so 5 seconds before, flick the switch. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. Whoosh. All of a sudden, 2 car lengths in like a few hundred meters, which was like, what? Did the stage, finished. But everybody said, hang on, what on earth just happened there? They saw that it had a performance advantage. And we hadn't used it. Other than that point there, we hadn't used that switch again, that rally. But this was their downfall, because in the following rally, we were going to Rally Catalunya. So there's 2 rounds to the World Championship left. There's Catalunya, and then going into Rally GB to finish. And we were leading the World Championship. Brilliant. So we were set up quite nicely, and I think we had a reasonable lead. It wasn't going to be easy, but it was still a reasonable lead. So we went into Rally Catalunya, and we carried on, and drove really well on that event. And we were actually beating Didier Auriol on tarmac, our tarmac ace. And we were leading the rally. So we did the first day and we were leading. And we went back to Lorette de Mar that night. And for the main service, normal thing, we went in and had our dinner and all the rest of it. And normally then they'll completely change transmission, clutches. And we have a brand new turbo every day, so change the turbo. But there was a scrutineer at each car. So these scrutineers, when the turbo came off the car, the scrutineer said, right, thank you, we'll take this now. And off they went. So we woke up the next morning. We didn't know anything of this. We woke up the next morning. Off we went up to the first stage, and there was the engineer there called Dieter Bulling. You know, and we were just having tires and everything else ready for the start of this stage. And Dieter Bulling was like multiple chain smoking. Like if he could have smoked the packet in one go, he would have. He was grey. He was pacing up and down the service park, and he looked really worried. I went for a pee and saw Dieter. I said, everything okay, Dieter? Yes, okay, Nicky. Good luck today. Good luck. And off we went. So as it was, 2 stages later, we rolled out of the rally. But later that night, the scrutineers would find out exactly what was going on. And Toyota had manufactured that. It was a wonderful piece of technology. It was a restrictor in the inlet side, which when you put 2 clamps on it, opened up this spring bias thing, which allowed extra air in around the restrictor side of things, which meant with more fuel, more boost and everything else, more power. And that's what we tried in Australia. But instead of trying it on a normal stage start where it was just 1 car, they tried it on a 2-car super special in front of the whole world. And that was their downfall.
There's a wonderful cutaway drawing of it. Have you seen it? Where somebody's actually drawn how it all works and taken the top of it so you can see it all working.
It's a wonderful bit of engineering. And the thing is, the FIA would have inspected this thing and checked the diameter of the restrictor. So, and they put a seal on it so that you couldn't see it once you look at the turbo. It was perfect, but it was these two clamps, but they found it. And of course, then the shit hit the fan. So then Toyota then were banned from the World Championship. All points to that point had been scrapped. Our World Championship had gone by the wayside. But of course, it meant that Subaru now, with Carlos and Colin, had the opportunity to win the World Championship. And then it was the whole Colin McRae kick in the bin, and they told him to stop and let Carlos win. And, there was hell to pay. But unfortunately, that was probably the last time anybody was seriously struck off from the World Championship.
Yeah,
must have been pretty tough for the management at that time, because you could imagine it's very
back in Japan as well. For them, they don't take that well, do they? It's a big shame. Shame.
We heard that from Mark Blundell, didn't we? In episode 4 episode 3 that they don't like to be embarrassed and seem to be a failure.
Yeah.
No, well, that would have been Ari Carry and on the sword and everything.
Yeah.
But as it was, UR and I had a contract for 1996, which we ended up doing odd things with Toyota Team Sweden and Grifoni in Italy and rallying in Ypres in Belgium, and we did an event in Switzerland and Sweden. We went to Indonesia, and we did some real weird stuff that year. But of course, at the end of that year, there was nothing else on the table for UR, and Dave Richards contacted me and asked me for a meeting. And we met up in a hotel in Bristol and explained that he'd like me to sit with Colin and how I felt about it, and explain the situation. They feel that Colin has kind of, once he won the World Championship, had gone off the rails a little bit, and they wanted something to gel him back together again. And we negotiated, and then after a couple of months, then we had an agreement, and that was it. In 1997, of course, there's the start of the McRae era, and we went to Subaru with the new World Rally car, and then the rest then from there on is kind of history then, really.
Yeah.
But it was a great opportunity.
Great.
Go on, Guy.
No, just saying it's a great story and a great era. I mean, for us, when we look back at rally and what, Kankkunen, McRae, all these great guys signs, for me, growing up, watching rally, and that's what I grew up watching. I think it was probably the same for you as well, Paul, wasn't it?
Yeah, Group A and then WRC. I was just getting into rallying during the Group A era. I used to go and watch on the RAC, and then, WRC, I was headlong into it by then. So see those two eras, that Celica of yours, Nicky, I think it was the one that Johnny Milner used at Cadwell Park at my beloved circuit, wasn't it? When it went back over the tyres in, and to see that thing and to hear a Group A car. World Rally cars sound great.
Yes.
But a Group A car is just something else, isn't it?
It was. And I mean, Group A was a great era. And I think that probably those, probably 92, 93, going then all the way through. So, we'd already been into Group A since 87-ish, I think. But really, the early 90s through to World Rally Cars in 1997 was a great era. And then even into the early 2000s. And then things started to change with the format of events, restricting it down, less recce, centralized servicing, doing 3 or 4 stages, and then coming back and having your tires and choosing tires for 3 stages, where before it was like 1 stage, emergency service at the end, main service before the start of the next one, choosing your optimum tires for that stage, making sure and cutting them.
Was it disappointing at the time? I know it's disappointing looking back for you. You said that, but was it disappointing at the time to be moving towards that kind of era?
It was a little bit, yes. It was a little bit, but that's what it was. We had to go that way. Nobody was going to listen to us, and we had to make the best of it. But, you know, we'd already started playing around with stupid tyre zones in like 95 in Monte Carlo, where, you know, if we wanted to do anything, we had to do it ourselves in this controlled zone. And there were still mechanics there from the team, but they just had to watch us and tell us what to do. But they couldn't do it. I mean, what's the point in that? They're there. And, you know, this was the way that things changed. And really, you know, when David Richards got involved and was promoting the World Championship a lot, then he changed a lot of these rules and regulations, forced teams to compete in all of the World Championship, not like Mitsubishi would pick maybe 6 or 7 events and various other teams to come and do 6 or 7 events. Right, you're in for all of it or none of it. And that obviously gave some consistency to a championship organizer, but it also meant that less opportunities for up-and-coming drivers, because the smaller teams, you know, can't afford to do a full program. So, you know, there's good and bad in it all. But I think that, you know, I did enjoy the early WRC era. I mean, the Subaru that we had at that time was a stunning-looking car, and the 22B model that they called it in the road term. And it was I think the only car that was ever developed or designed outside Japan, and turned into the World Rally Car. And it was great to spend 2 years with Subaru. And the first year with Colin was probably the best season we'd ever had, but also a little disappointing as well in many ways, because we won quite a few events in that first year. And, you know, we were thrust in at the deep end, went straight testing, Monte Carlo, Sweden. We had a tricky test road in Sweden, I remember, really deep snow and quite badly rutted, and we got caught and we flipped on a snowbank and rolled, but it was next to no damage. And then we went to Monte Carlo Rally and we went off and crashed on some ice, which can always happen. No Super Rally at that time, which meant that once you retired, you retired. That was it, finished. Went to Sweden, and our teammate Kenneth Eriksson, you know, kind of spun us a bit of a yarn about the tyre in a critical situation, point in the rally towards the end. And he took this tyre and he said it's a risk, and Colin chose not to take it. But in the end, it was the right tyre, and he was massively quicker. We went from 2nd down to 4th, and he went on to win. That was fine. And then we went to Africa. So with Colin, and this was my first event with Colin. So if you look at Colin McRae and all the rallies in the World Championship, the one event you would say is not Colin's rally. It's Africa. Because, you know, you just have to use your head as much as you did your pedals and your feet, you know? So
just to give anyone listening just a bit of context, the car you were in Africa in, imagine there's a Subaru World Rally car, a big snorkel on the bonnet, it's got a big bull bar on the front, a big grate on the front, isn't it? And the thing is so jacked up, you could probably fit another wheel in the wheel arch, couldn't you?
Well, yeah, it's need much greater ground clearance because the road conditions were bad. And I remember when we got there, before we started the recce, we went to do a test because we had proper rally cars that we could use for recce cars at that time, because road cars don't last 5 minutes on recces in Africa. They just fall apart, especially at any reasonable pace anyway. So we went and used our car to do a test. So we went to a place called Windy Corner, which is right out by Karen, right on the western edge of Nairobi, going into the Great Rift Valley. And you went across this fairly level road, which was kind of half and half good, half bad. And then we had a steep descent, which was incredibly rocky with massive boulders, probably, 12 inches, 20, 25, 30 centimeters high, and boulders and going up and down and driving around. And so we made the notes down and made the notes back. So I said to him, what are all these care, caution and triple cautions then? And he said, that's just to warn me about the conditions. And I said, well, listen, I think we need to make some changes. he said, "Why? What are you thinking?" And I said, "Well, if you want to get through this rally, you've got to have two set of pace notes. You've got to have one set of notes for the speed, and you've got to have another set of pace notes, for the conditions. So effectively, you need to go as fast as you possibly can, but slow enough that you don't damage the car." Right, okay. How are we going to achieve that then? And I said, well, obviously, you've got to use your pace note system as we've got it. That's your speed. But then we need to, and this is obviously all experience from UR and everybody else I've done Africa with. I said, you've got to describe what condition you're facing, and then you've got to have a number of speeds so you know exactly how quick to go over those conditions. And I said, we ought to use a descriptive system. So stop being the worst, say bad, medium, fast. So I think we had 4, maybe easy, but we had 4 or 5 different speeds. So I said, and then you need to look at the road in front of you. And if it's a smoother line on the left-hand side, keep left over 50 over medium rocks, for instance. But then you need to give yourself a gear speed for a medium, a stop, a bad, and all the rest of it. Right, okay. So we chatted for another 10, 15 minutes, and we came up with a scenario. And he said, right, we've got that. I said, right, let's go make some more notes. So we went down this test road and we made some notes using this system. So we went back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and then we made a couple of changes, and we went tested, and we tried the tires, tried this, tried that. He said, yeah, he said, I think I got that pace note system now, that's fine. And, off we went into the recce. So into the recce we went, and we used this pace note system, and the recce was quite interesting. We had some dodgy clutches which somebody given us to use up, but little did we know that they wouldn't last 5 minutes. We went into this river crossing, got stuck in the middle of this river. We lost the whole day of recce in the middle of this river. And anyway, that's another story. And but we did the recce, we made these notes, and then we went and did the rally. And we're on this the first day, we went into the rally, and we had a good pace. There was people going quicker than us. Armin was going quick. Tommy was going reasonably quick. Then had some punctures. Burnsy wasn't too bad, but he was a few minutes behind us. And then on one section, heading back up to a place called Kajiado Road, we had 70 kilometers to the end of the section, and the alternator light came on. So Cole said, shit. He said, what's the gauges say? So fiddled around and looked, and yeah, we were losing voltage. We had no battery, no charge. So we telephoned or spoke on the radio to the helicopter. Boys, the flipping alternator's gone. We haven't got any charge. Okay, we'll come back to you. So then next minute, they'd run telephone back to base or radio back to base. Then they came back and said, right, listen, boys, you've got to switch off one fuel pump, switch off this, switch off that, switch off the trip meter because you don't need that, switch this, switch that, and we'll come back to you. Then next minute, they'll come back to us again. Right, boys, we want you to switch off the radio. If we need to speak to you, we'll swoop down in front of you with the helicopter so you know to switch the radio on to speak to us. So in the end, then they were trying in a panic to think, right, what have they got in the car that'll help them get to the end? Oh, there's that electric gun with a separate battery. Maybe we can use that battery and wire it into the system. And anyway, as it happened, we got to the end of the section, luckily. It was starting to misfire just towards the end. Checked into the last time control, drove it, and we had literally 200 meters into a school playground where we had service right at the end of the stage. Got to the time control and the car cut out. Checked in on time, started to push it. Then the boys took over from the end of control zone, pushed it into service, new alternator, got the thing back up and running. So we ended up, I think we were second overall, overnight halt. And the second day, is the road. It was the longest day of the rally, and it was making our way all the way north and then coming back again. And we were leaving early one morning. It was 5 o'clock, heading up to a place called Naivasha, north of Nairobi. And we went to the service park before a 150-kilometer road section, which Colin and myself, Nick, called the road to hell, because it started rough, got even rougher, had a slight spell of nice stuff in the middle for about 6 Ks, and then got rough again, and then a little bit of tar. So it was the road to hell. So we get to this service, 5:30 in the morning, and it was just turning daybreak, and the fitness trainer was there, Bernie Shrewsbury. He said, right, boys, this is a big day today. You've got to hydrate yourself, this, that, and the other. And there were some last-minute dramas with the car or something. So we left there really a bit last minute and got to the arrival controls just in time. Cole said, have we got any time here for me to jump out a minute? And I said, no, we're straight into the time control. So right into the time control we went, and then put our gear on, and 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, off we go. So it was rough, keep left over, bad rough for 200, into stop ditch, 100, 6 right, 6 left, fast right, whatever it was, all these notes, and it was rough, and there was stones, and then we turned a hairpin left onto a old railway line. We were on this railway line for something like 50 kilometers. You'd think it would be nice, wouldn't you? It was completely destroyed, and if we averaged 30 mile an hour for the next 50 Ks, that was about it. And then we turned onto this smooth piece of road that had been regraded up to Elementaita Crossroads. Cole said, Nick, he said, I'm going to have to stop. He said, I need a pee. We said, what? He said, I need a pee, he said, I took a whole bit of extra water, he said, and I'm bursting. He said, I can't hold it anymore. So I said, shit, forget about it. I said, loosen the belts off a little bit and undo, because we wore T-shirts and like fireproof trousers, effectively. Yeah. I said, undo the button on your trousers, loosen the seatbelt, and just relieves the pressure. And I said, you'll probably be okay to get you through. So he did that. He was fiddling away, and Elementaita Crossroads turned 3 left minus, and then we went 30 kilometers uphill. And there'd been some rain and water had come down, and this thing was rutted and whoom, whoom, whoom. At the end of this hill, turn 3 left plus onto tarmac, and we had about another 6, 7 Ks of tarmac. So it was 4th gear, 5th gear, 6th gear. And he said, take the wheel. I said, you what? He said, take the wheel. He said, I can't hold it anymore. Shit. So I'm loosening my belts now, and they were all long flat out corners in 6th gear up this main road. And we got the helicopter flying above us. Now there's people on push bikes, people walking, there's goats and donkeys and dogs running everywhere. McRae now is under the belt, so I flicked off the camera because I didn't want to get excluded, so nobody can exclude us for taking the belts off. So I flicked off the camera. So now you can imagine the scene. Pace notes on my lap. I've loosened my belt so I can hold the steering wheel. He's now undone his belts, and now he's out of the seat, and he's turned himself to the side, and now he's trying to open the door. Now, and he's got his willy out, and he's trying to open the door to pee out the door, you see. When you try opening a door at 100 mile an hour, there's no chance. So anyway, he just had to slam the door, so he was just peeing against the side of the door, you see. So all this pee was going into the footwell. And anyway, now this is in the middle of a section of Safari Rally. So it was long flat right, long flat left was a bit tricky because I had to lean a little bit more. Now I was concerned, and then there was a long flat right, and he's still there peeing and peeing. Long flat right again, he's still peeing. And right at the end of this section, you came in.
Is he talking to you?
Pardon?
Is he talking at this point?
No, I'm just sat there, just driving, and he's peeing. And, there's at the end of this section, tarmac, you go into this village, and it was really deep potholes. And I knew we were getting to the end of this tarmac section. I said, Cole, you're going to have to hurry up. He said, I'm never going to hold it through the potholes. And you know what it's like when you start out in a pee, you can't stop it, can you?
Yeah.
You've got to let it go. He said, I can't stop. I can't stop. So he's peeing away. Then last minute, he falls back in the seat again, grabs the steering wheel, bones through these potholes sideways, and eventually puts his seatbelts on, and off we go again. And all of this urine is all swilling around underneath him. He was pretty hydrated, so it wasn't this strong stuff. It was fine. Anyway, we finished the end of this section. We did about another 50 k's of pretty rough roads. And we get to the end. And in that section, Tommy McKinnon had 6 punctures. And he was putting good punctured tyres on to try and continue. Then had complete transmission failure. Armin Schwartz had some other serious problem. He was dropped loads of time. Richard Burns had a problem, a slight problem, I think, but managed to continue all right. But we were fastest in that section by 3.5 minutes.
So he could have stopped.
Yeah, and that sealed our victory for that rally. So and I said to him after,
you've actually driven on a WRC event, Nicky, because you technically drove some of that stage.
Yes. Well, I said to him, Carl, I said, we were fastest by 3.5 minutes. I said, you better let me drive a little bit more often. He said, you can fuck off. But anyway, it sealed our victory. But you know, he got this pace note system perfectly. He was patient. He didn't get frustrated when somebody was quicker. And we used that system. We went on to win Safari for Subaru for the first time. So they were delighted, you could imagine. But we used that pace note system on events like Acropolis Rally, which we won 4 times, I think, together. On Argentina, which is notoriously rough. You know, he really used this system exceptionally well. And when we joined Ford in '99, you would have seen our Focus at M Sport with the first winning Focus. And, you know, this came out of the blue, but we weren't quickest on one section on that rally, but we won it by 15 minutes. But it was just the perfect pace. We weren't getting in trouble, no punctures, no damper issues. We just kept going. And where other people were having a problem here, breaking a damper, losing 20 minutes, losing 10, we just kept that steady pace. And
that was the year when he was off the side of the track, wasn't it? And you were actually looking for bits of stage that were smoother. Was that the year?
Yes, that's it. I told him a story about Bjorn Voldergaard and how in certain sections, in this one particular area, it was an area where they had a lot of agriculture, cornfields and stuff. And the roads, over many times of ploughing roads, trying to smooth it out, the field levels were about 1 meter higher than the road. So when the rains come, the water comes off the fields into the roads, and the roads are destroyed generally. So we had this one section, and it was a 45-degree corner to the right, and then we went straight onto a field. And we went up this field for 1.5 kilometers in this open area, just where Channel 4 were filming. They couldn't believe.
Remember the helicopter shots, and then everyone else followed you into it, didn't they?
Yeah. So, but that was all about taking the fastest and smoothest line, looking after the car. And, you know, he drove brilliantly after that. And I think that 97 Safari changed a lot of things for Colin. You know, he became where, you know, he really started to drive with his head a lot more once he'd used the system that he could use and understand, and how it became quite easy and logical. And you know, that changed him a lot, that did. And all the rough rallies, all the events that normally was not for Colin McRae became his strongest ones.
Brilliant.
But that's the road to hell story for you.
That's fantastic. That's great. So, Paul, where do we go now? I'm
just making a few notes on this, because there are certain bits of this that I want to be revisiting and just putting out on social media, because it's been, I use the word adventure quite a bit, guys, to describe what we're doing here, because it is the stories and it's the adventures. But I said to you before we did this, I've spoken to Nicky a few times, and the stories will just flow and flow, and it is that adventure. And I feel like I've lived a fair bit of it there. There's been highs and lows. What a story.
Yeah. No, well, there was plenty, but you know, and that first year, I mean, we did. You know, he felt at the end of 1997, we'd won 5 or 6 rallies, I think, but we'd had lots of engine issues where the cam belt tensioners were letting us down all the time, and we finished second in the championship. We should have won, really, but the engine let us down. There was nothing we can do when that happens. But at the beginning of 1998, I think Colin was feeling that, you know, I just have to. If I stay any longer in Subaru, bearing in mind he'd been there since 1991 or something, maybe even 1990, from the really early legacy days, he said, unless I go now, he said, I probably won't be able to drive anywhere else. They'll think I'm a Subaru man, and that's it. Yeah. And that's why through 1998, Ford came knocking on the door, you know, obviously with the Ford Focus in mind and the World Rally Program.
A big check.
Yes, big check. I mean, at that time, the biggest check in world rallying. That at that point, but they wanted Colin to come along, and you know that sealed the deal. But it was you know, I said, listen, a bit of a risky move, really, because the car hadn't even run when we signed the contract. Didn't have any idea what it was like or what it was going to be like, and you know, 1999 was probably, I was really excited at the start with a brand new car, brand new format, Martini Racing sponsorship. Yeah. I mean, me, Martini,
awesome.
A car is almost as synonymous as Toyota Castro, red and white, green and red. Sorry.
Did Christian Loriot go? Was he? When did he become?
Not at
that point. No.
He came much later. I think the end of 2000 for 2001 series. So 2001 was really one of Christian's first cars.
Right.
But this car, at that time, the whole project of the Ford Focus had been left in the hands of Gunther Steiner, of Haas fame now. You know, and Gunther was our team boss, and for pulling this car together. And I think it was Millbrook. They had a base at Millbrook, and we went there when the car fired up for the first time. But we went to Monte Carlo to test in Monte Carlo, and we went in mid-December, and Colin drove the car. He said, you know, we were up in the mountains, damp roads, a bit of ice and snow. Cole said, listen, this thing's not working at all. He said, it's too hard on the damper. He said, I can't get any feel. I don't feel there's any roll. They said, well, we got some different bars, and the bars didn't make much difference. He said, listen, suspension's way too hard. He said, who worked out the suspension settings? And then they had the springs. We went down to the softer spring that they had, and still way too hard. So we went down then to just north of Saint-Tropez, and there was a mountain road just off the motorway that we could use before you drop down to Saint-Tropez, and we tested there with lovely warm, dry conditions. And he said, maybe it's starting to work, but he said, we're still way, way too hard on suspension. So they said, right, we're going to have to get some more springs, and we're going to change the dampers, we're going to do this, do that. So, right, can the test, we can go home, we'll give you a shout, we're going to have to come back. Anyway, 5 days later, back on a flight back down to Nice, went again to the same road in Saint-Tropez, started testing, and, you know, we did it for 2 days, and he said, listen, it's still not, he said it was still way too hard, he said, and there's this problem, and then power steering problem, an oil leak on the power steering, the car caught fire, and shit, then we had to go home again. So then they had to get some more springs made, but now we were right on top of Christmas. So we had Christmas, and they repaired the car. Eventually, we went back to Christmas and New Year, started to get it working a little bit, and then made some more changes with another test very early after the New Year before we started the recce. And we kind of got the car somewhere near. And, you know, then it was a really tough rally. The first stage was 50 kilometers long, and I remember starting it was really icy and slippery, and Carlos went off, Didier Auriol went off right in the first few Ks, and we'd done about 11K climb up to this col, and we had a fire in the car. We had to stop because we hadn't done so much mileage, especially under real serious load, and they didn't have enough heat protection on the exhaust, and the paint was burning, it was choking us, and we had to get out and put the fire out, clean the floor up, jump back in, do the rest of the stage. We managed to finish third and then got excluded for some different fuel pump. So it was a very frustrating year, but we went to Safari and won it out of the blue. Like, we thought, Jesus, how did that happen? Having retired in Sweden. Then we went to Portugal Rally, a proper sprint event, straight after Africa. Yeah, we won that too. But then, other than Corsica, we retired on every other event that year. And that was probably the most frustrating year I've ever had. 2 victories made it sweeter, but you imagine going through all the testing, all the car building, all the recce, all the build-up. You retire without Super Rally, you come home.
Yeah.
And going to China and China Rally, and literally in the first stage, about 3 or 4 Ks in, there was a right-hand corner over this just flat rounded boulder into a hairpin left. We went over it. Everybody had driven over this thing. We went over this boulder, bang, the wheel broke. Something on the suspension wheel came out. We watched the next 4 cars. They all did the same line, round the hairpin, and off they went. Our teammate, Thomas Radtron, came, went over the boulder in exactly the same spot, bang, suspension broke and wheel came out. And we both retired about 3-4 kilometers into the first stage in China.
Oh.
You imagine. And that was it. Everybody pack up and go home.
Oh, long way to go, isn't it? For when you get the result, it's always a long trip home, isn't it?
But it was a big learning curve for everybody, and especially with a brand new car which had done so little mileage. But it was just a machining issue in a pin. But that's the kind of year we had. It was written off really after that.
Yeah.
But the whole 4 years and Martini were synonymous really, and we had some lots of victories during this time as well. I mean, we must have won about 9, at least two rallies every year, I think, at least, and a few ups and downs as well, and possible world championships. But really at the end of it all, although we ended up sort of parting ways at the end of 2002, getting back together again, doing 2 rallies with Skoda in 2005, with Skoda having probably more PR in Wales Rally GB build-up than they'd had in their previous 25 years of rallying. So shows what Colin brought to them.
Absolutely.
Australia on the verge of giving them their best ever result in terms of a podium place, and we're confident of definitely a second position, to then having the poor mechanics making a clutch change in the last day when it should have been done the night before, and that was retirement. And then doing some odd rallies with Colin in the 6R4 and Donegal, and having a really dramatic spin and staying on the road.
That's a great clip on YouTube, isn't it? I love that. Love that.
Just everything about Colin is just like
drama. Yeah.
How did you do that? Things like, we spoke about X Games earlier, and then we did Citroen with the Zara, and then we did some stuff with his Escort. But, and then of course it just came to the point where, he had his helicopter crash, and then the whole thing just imploded really. It was a bit of course it was a major shock, a serious shock. But, the fact that he said to me, you don't mess about with these things, he said, it's bigger and better than I am. And he said, you just do not mess with helicopters. And, look what happened.
Isn't it? Just so tragic,
Yeah.
It often happens. It's like a bit like with Michael Schumacher, unfortunately, you have all this amazing career and take all these risks, and then doing something that you you would maybe deem not. I mean, it is obviously, of course, it's risky with the helicopters and stuff, but to get killed in such a way is just so tragic. But
we can't end on a tragic note, because the superstar story that is Colin and your years with Colin, Nicky, kind of lives on, doesn't it? And people still talk about. I mean, the Dirt Series has its origins in what you did with Colin McRae Rally, and his legacy is still spoken about by young rally fans who probably barely saw him in action these days, which is pretty special. No one's really done that.
Yeah, I think champions come, die, and go, and are forgotten. And I think Colin McRae will never be forgotten, purely because I think that he was the people's champion. He didn't have to be the world champion. He was the people's champion because he won their hearts through his do-or-die spectacular driving style. And people just loved that side of him. The fact that he was willing to risk all just to win a rally. And, but that's what made him what he was. And, I think he's going to live on a lot longer in terms of the name than anybody else in the sport, and I mean, if you have British people now, name me a British rally driver, they're going to say, Colin McRae, aren't they?
Yeah, 100%, absolutely. So, Paul, should we head into some questions for some quick fire questions for Nicky?
Definitely, we've covered all the questions through this.
I want to count down. I got 7% battery left.
Okay, well, we'll go into the quick fire questions then.
But we can keep going. If you lose, because if we lose the screen, we lose the voiceover, don't we?
Yes. So what we'll do is, it's a bit like being on a rally here. We've got a pressure guy. We've covered all the questions that people have asked us on various things. I've been flicking through as we've gone through the story.
Go for it.
So let's go.
Go for it. Go.
So it's just very, very quick, easy questions, Nicky. So just first thing that comes into your mind, okay? So Top Gear or Grand Tour?
Top Gear.
Colin McRae Rally 1 or 2?
Definitely 2.
Ari Vatanen or Sebastian Loeb?
I love them both for different reasons. It's got to be Sebastian Loeb.
Okay. Beach holiday or adventure holiday?
Beach.
Okay.
But enough adventure in my lifetime.
Exactly. Dogs or cats?
Definitely a dog.
And Group A or WRC?
Group A.
Yeah, great stuff. And then what we do is we do a pass-along question. So we've got a pass-along question from Elfin, who obviously was our last guest. He said, what piece of advice would you give to an up-and-coming co-driver? What one bit of advice you could give them?
Definitely to get out and do as much as you possibly can. Do more and more events, and don't be afraid of asking questions. No matter how stupid you may think it sounds, ask what you want to know, because that will help you big time going forward.
Brilliant. That's good for the...
You say your next guest is Stefan.
It's going to be, I think it's going to be Stefan, yeah. So have you got a question for him?
Yes.
It's Stefan Janssen, if you're listening to this. Bit of a scoop.
Yeah. Yeah. So
if he's going to be, will he possibly listen to this?
Possibly.
Nordschleifer or Safari Rally?
Okay, good one. I like that one.
Yeah, that's a really good one. Good link as well. Now Stefan has to be the next guest now, Guy.
Exactly. Yeah, no, I spoke to Stefan yesterday, and he's coming on next. So I'll definitely put that to him and see what he has to say.
Nicky, this is the first time I've ever had a chance to chat these stories through with you when we haven't had a time frame. We've either been on a camera or on a stage somewhere with a very short time frame, and I feel like I've really got right under the skin of your career there. That was absolutely phenomenal. Thank you so much for being so honest with us.
No, it's a pleasure. There's so much more you can cover, but you know what it's like. I mean, why make it short when you can make it interesting and long? So I like to make a story out of something. So.
Well, I'm thinking, Nicky, maybe down the line, we spoke earlier, maybe we need to do a Juha Kankkunen and Nicky Grist Spinning Wheels podcast, and that's something we can work on in the future, because I think there's more stories in there for sure, and I think getting the two of you together will be great.
We didn't really speak much about you, did we? And there's some great stories with you too. So
well, that's every reason to get you guys together. But I want to thank you for your time today. It's been absolutely fascinating. As I say, I know you pretty well, and I could have sat for hours and hours and hours and listened to those stories. It's been great to get to know a bit more about you and about your career and your fantastic experiences. And once again, thank you for coming on the podcast and taking the time.
Oh, it's our pleasure, and good luck with spinning wheels.